Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was the true Joy Boy, fated to marry the mermaid princess Shirahoshi? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The sun-kissed maelstrom. The air was clean. That was the first thing Naruto Uzumaki had noticed, the first truly alien sensation in a world that was not his own. It was a crisp, briny cleanness, different from the earthy scent of Konoha's forests or the dusty air of Suna. Here, the world smelled of salt and distance, of endless, churning water and a sky so vast it humbled the soul. He stood on a cliffside, the wind whipping his worn black cloak around him, his bright blonde hair a stark beacon against the gray stone and tumultuous sea. He was in his late 20s, the youthful exuberance of his face tempered by the quiet steel in his blue eyes. The fourth grade ninja war felt like a lifetime ago, a brutal, bloody memory that had forged him from a determined boy into a pillar of a tenuous peace. He had been the seventh Hokage, a leader, a husband, a father. And then, the call had come. It hadn't been a voice, not in the traditional sense. It was a song woven into the very fabric of his being. A resonance that pulled at the sage's energy within him, a deep, thrumming beat that echoed the rhythm of his own liberated heart. It was a promise made long ago, a duty left unfulfilled. And it had drawn him from his world into this one. He didn't know how, or why, only that the sage of six paths had appeared to him in a dream, his expression not of command, but of solemn hope. A promise must be kept. The ancient spirit had said, his voice the rustle of old parchment. The sun must rise again, to greet the heart of the sea. When Naruto awoke, the scent of salt had replaced the familiar smell of his own home. He had been here for 3 weeks, a ghost on the shores of an unknown land. He'd learned the language through a subtle application of chakra to the linguistic centers of his brain while listening to the villagers in the small port town below. He'd learned of pirates and marines, of a world government that held the globe in its iron fist, and of strange fruits that granted impossible powers. It was a world of chaos and control, of breathtaking freedom and suffocating order. He watched the storm on the horizon, a swirling vortex of black clouds and angry, white-capped waves. Yet, directly above him in the town of Shell's Town, the sky was a perfect, unbroken blue. The line between the calm and the storm was unnaturally sharp, as if some invisible barrier held the tempest at bay. Naruto held it there. It was a simple thing, a minor exertion of his will over the natural world, a whisper of sage energy to persuade the wind and the water to grant this small stretch of coast a moment's peace. It was draining, but necessary. He needed to observe, to understand the currents of this new reality before he dove in. A sound, deep and guttural, tore through the air, drawing his attention from the horizon to the churning waters closer to the shore. The ocean swelled, a great, mountainous shape rising from the depths. It was a creature of impossible scale, a serpent of the sea with skin like mottled green rock and eyes the size of boulders, burning with a primal, mindless hunger. A sea king. The villagers, who had been cautiously tending to their boats and nets despite the ominous weather, screamed and scattered, their cries thin against the monster's guttural roar. Naruto sighed. So much for observation. He didn't move with a shinobi's explosive speed. He simply stepped off the cliff. There was no dramatic plummet, no desperate scrabble for purchase. He descended as gently as a falling leaf, his chakra control so absolute that the air itself seemed to cushion his fall. He landed silently on the wet sand of the beach, his cloak settling around him as he began to walk towards the water's edge. The Sea King, its attention fixed on the cluster of buildings that promised a meal, paid him no mind. It reared back its massive head, jaws agape, ready to crush the town's pier in a single, devastating bite. Hey! Naruto's voice wasn't loud, yet it cut through the roar of the ocean and the panicked screams of the people. It was calm, conversational, but it carried an authority that could not be ignored. The Sea King paused, its massive, reptilian eye swiveled, focusing on the small, bright figure on the shore. Contempt and confusion flickered in its gaze. This creature was an insect, a morsel. Naruto raised a hand, palm open. He didn't weave signs. He didn't gather a swirling ball of chakra. He simply reached out. Not with his hand, but with his will. A wave of energy, potent and overwhelming, rolled from him. It was not chakra as the people of this world would understand it. It was purer, older. It was the energy of life itself, refined through 1,000 battles and tempered by a heart that had known both the deepest despair and the most profound love. Mixed within it was an indomitable spirit, a will that had bent gods and monsters to its side. A conqueror's haki, though he did not know the name for it. To him, it was just him. The Sea King froze. Its massive body went rigid, the muscles locking in place. The mindless hunger in its eyes was replaced by a sudden, shocking clarity. It wasn't fear, not the cowering terror of a lesser beast before a predator. It was awe. It was the primal recognition of a force of nature meeting one far greater. The creature on the shore was not prey. It was not an obstacle. It was the sun. It was the warmth of the deep currents, the light that pierced the abyssal depths, the joyful song of life that echoed in its ancient, reptilian soul. Naruto walked into the water, the waves parted. G before him as if respecting his passage. He stopped when the sea lapped around his waist, his blue eyes locked with the Sea King's colossal one. He brought his hand to the creature's rough, scaly snout. A gentle pulse of nature energy flowed from his palm, a soothing balm that calmed the beast's roiling instincts. The Sea King let out a low, rumbling sound, no longer a roar of aggression but a croon of contentment. It leaned into his touch, its immense head bowing until its chin rested on the surface of the water, creating a wave that gently rocked the fishing boats in the harbor. From the town, the villagers watched in stunned silence. Their terror had given way to a disbelieving reverence. The monster that had threatened to devour their homes and lives was now docile, nuzzling the hand of the blonde stranger like a colossal, scaly pet. Naruto gave the Sea King one last, reassuring pat. "Go on now," he said, his voice still quiet, but carrying an unmistakable command. "There's no food for you here. Go back to the deep water." The Sea King rumbled its agreement. With a grace that belied its size, it submerged, its massive form slipping beneath the waves without a splash, leaving behind only ripples in the now calm sea. The artificial barrier holding back the storm dissolved, but the tempest itself had lost its fury. The churning black clouds began to dissipate, and the angry waves settled into a gentle swell. The sun, which had been shining only over the town, now broke through the clouds across the entire sky, bathing the sea in a warm, golden light. Naruto turned and walked back to the shore, the water receding from his path. He found the entire population of Shell's town gathered on the beach, their faces a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a healthy dose of fear. An old man, the mayor by the looks of his slightly more respectable attire, stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Thank you, sir," he stammered. You saved us. We have nothing to offer you, but..." Naruto waved a dismissive hand, a small, easy smile gracing his lips. "It was nothing. Just happened to be in the neighborhood." His casual dismissal of the event seemed to stun them even more than the feat itself. Before anyone could say another word, a different sound reached them. It was the rhythmic creak of oars and the sharp, barked commands of disciplined men. 3 ships were approaching the harbor, their sails bearing the emblem of a stylized seagull. Marines. World government. Naruto's smile didn't falter, but a watchfulness entered his eyes. He had avoided contact with this world's authorities thus far. It seemed that was no longer an option. The lead ship docked, and a platoon of white uniformed Marines marched down the gangplank, their rifles held at the ready. They formed 2 disciplined lines, creating a path for their commanding officer. He was a tall man with silver hair cut into a severe military style and a face that looked as if it had been carved from granite. A deep scar ran diagonally across his left eye, which was a cold, calculating gray. He wore a crisp, dark blue suit under his white marine coat, and the insignia on his shoulder denoted him as a commodore. The calm, Mador's eyes swept over the scene, the stunned villagers, the unnaturally calm sea, and finally, the blond man in the black cloak who stood at the center of it all, looking entirely unconcerned. "I am Commodore Brannick of the 153rd Marine Branch," the man announced, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. "We detected a significant energy fluctuation in this area, followed by the dissipation of a GRADE-4 oceanic maelstrom. Care to explain what happened here?" His gaze was sharp, analytical. He wasn't asking a question, he was demanding a report. Naruto met his gaze without flinching. Big Fish came. I told it to go home. The storm got sad and left too. A few of the younger Marines snickered, but a sharp glance from Brannick silenced them instantly. The Commodore's expression didn't change. He took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving Naruto's. I see. Big Fish, Brannick said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. And you are a traveler, Naruto replied simply. A traveler with the ability to pacify a sovereign Class C king and disperse a maelstrom with a word. Brannick's hand rested on the hilt of the sword at his hip. That's a very particular kind of traveler. The kind the world government takes a great interest in. We have questions for people like you. I'm sure you do, Naruto said, his easygoing demeanor hardening just enough to reveal the bedrock of strength beneath. But I'm not really in the mood for an interrogation. I'm just passing through. That is not your decision to make, Brannick stated flatly. He gestured to his men. Apprehend him. Use of seastone restraints is authorized. 4 Marines, larger than the rest, stepped forward, each holding a pair of heavy, gray metal cuffs. Naruto watched them approach, his posture relaxed, almost lazy. He hadn't moved a muscle. Yet the air around him grew thick, heavy with an unseen pressure. The 4 Marines slowed, their steps becoming hesitant. It felt like they were trying to walk through thick molasses. Their breathing grew ragged, and beads of sweat broke out on their foreheads. They were looking at him, but their eyes were wide with a primal terror, as if they were seeing not a man, but something infinitely more dangerous. Brannick's eyes narrowed. He saw the effect his presence was having on his men. He drew his sword, the blade a gleaming, black metal that seemed to absorb the light. You have a powerful will. A shame you stand against the justice of the world. The Commodore moved, and he was fast. In the blink of an eye, he closed the distance between them, his black blade sla. Shing in a vicious arc aimed at Naruto's neck. To the villagers, it was an impossible blur of motion. To Naruto, it was painfully slow. He didn't dodge. He didn't block. He simply raised 2 fingers. The tip of the black blade stopped a millimeter from his skin, held fast by the pressure of his index and middle fingers. The force of the blow dissipated into nothingness, not even a breeze stirring the hair around his face. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Brannick's face was a mask of utter disbelief. His arms trembled with the effort of his strike, yet his blade, a famed Mado blade that had cut through steel and stone, was held motionless by 2 fingers. He couldn't push it forward, he couldn't pull it back. It was as if his sword had become an extension of an immovable mountain. Yuto's blue eyes were no longer calm or amused. They were ancient, filled with a power that could shatter continents and a wisdom that had seen the birth and death of stars. Justice. Naruto's voice was low, but every person on the beach heard it as if it were whispered directly into their ear. Your justice is the cage of order. You chain the world in the name of peace, but you fear the very freedom you claim to protect. You see power that you don't control, and you call it a threat. You're not interested in justice. You're interested in control. He flicked his fingers. The force was precise, controlled. Brannick's sword was ripped from his grasp. It flew through the air, spinning end over end, before embedding itself deep into the mast of his ship, half a kilometer away, with a resounding thunk. Brannick stumbled back, his face pale, his composure finally shattered. His men, who had been struggling against Naruto's oppressive will, collapsed to their knees, gasping for air as the pressure suddenly vanished. What are you? Brannick breathed, his hand clutching his now empty hilt. Naruto ignored him. His gaze shifted, just for a second, to one of the younger Marines in the back row. The boy was shaking, but not just from fear. His eyes held a spark of something else, a flicker of doubt, of conflict. Naruto's sensory abilities, honed to a razor's edge, picked up the subtle tells. The boy's heart rate was different from the others. He wasn't just afraid of Naruto, he was afraid of the situation, of the orders he was meant to follow. On the inside of the boy's wrist, partially hidden by his uniform, was a small, almost invisible tattoo, a single, open eye. Naruto had seen a similar mark etched into the wall of a rundown tavern a week ago, next to a whispered word, Veritas. Truth. A seed of an idea began to form in Naruto's mind. A faction within the world government. A resistance. Interesting. He turned his attention back to Brannick, his expression once again unreadable. I am Naruto Uzumaki, and I am not your enemy. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Not unless you force me to be. He began to walk away, not towards the town, but down the beach, away from the harbor and the Marines. He moved with a steady, unhurried pace, his back completely exposed. It was a statement of absolute confidence, a clear declaration that he considered no one here a threat. Do not let him leave. Brannick roared, finding his voice again, his training and fanaticism overriding his fear. Open fire. The Marines scrambled to their feet, raising their rifles. The volley of shots was deafening. A dozen lead bullets streaking towards Naruto's back. The bullets never reached him. They stopped in midair, a foot from his cloak, suspended as if frozen in time. Naruto didn't even turn around. With a lazy wave of his hand, the bullets dropped harmlessly to the sand. He continued walking, disappearing into the glare of the afternoon sun. The Marines stood frozen, their rifles still smoking, their minds struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Commodore Brannick stared at the empty stretch of beach, then at his sword, still vibrating in the mast of his ship. He was a man who believed in the absolute power of the world government, in the unshakable structure of its justice. Today, he had seen something that defied that structure, something that existed outside of it, beyond it. A power that didn't seek to conquer or destroy, but simply was. It was a power that felt less like a weapon and more like the world itself had decided to take human form. And for the first time in his life, Commodore Brannick felt a chilling, profound sense of dread. The world was about to change. Naruto walked for miles, following the coastline. The sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He was alone, a stranger in a strange land, but he wasn't lonely. The song was still there, a faint, beautiful melody in the back of his mind. It was stronger now, clearer. It felt like a beacon, a gentle pull towards an unknown destination. It was the voice of a gentle heart, filled with a sorrow so deep it made the oceans weep. Yet also a hope so bright it could rival the sun. The heart of the sea. He didn't know who she was, or where she was. He only knew that she was waiting. That a promise had been made to her, long before he was ever born. A promise of freedom, a promise of a new dawn. He came to a small, secluded cove where an old fisherman was mending his nets next to a small, single-masted boat. It was a humble vessel, worn by time and the sea, but sturdy. The fisherman looked up, his weathered face wary as Naruto approached. Can I help you? The old man asked, his hand instinctively moving towards a rusty harpoon. I need a boat, Naruto said, his voice gentle. The fisherman grunted. Not for sale. Naruto reached into a pouch at his waist and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden fox. It was a simple piece of art, something he had whittled in his spare time, but the wood pulsed with a faint, warm chakra. He had imbued it with a touch of his own life force. I'm not looking to buy it, Naruto said, holding out the carving, but a gift, for passage. Take me to the entrance of the Grand Line. I can handle the sailing from there. He placed the fox on a nearby crate. This will bring you good health and calm seas. A promise. The old man looked from Naruto's earnest face to the wooden fox. He reached out a hesitant, gnarled hand and touched it. A warmth spread through his arm, soothing the ache in his old joints. A vitality he hadn't felt in years filling his chest. His eyes widened in shock. He looked back at Naruto, seeing not just a traveler, but something more. He nodded slowly. Get in. As the small boat pushed out into the open water, the last rays of sunlight disappeared. The sea was calm, and a canopy of stars, brighter and clearer than any he had ever seen, glittered overhead. The old fisherman was silent, occasionally glancing at the blond man who sat at the bow, staring out at the endless expanse of water as if he could see the entire world laid out before him. Naruto closed his eyes, focusing on the song. It was a lullaby of the deep, a yearning call from a gentle soul. He didn't know what dangers lay ahead, what enemies he would face in this world ruled by a rigid, unyielding government. He only knew his path. He was here to keep a promise. He was here to bring the dawn. The sun had set, but as the small boat sailed towards the horizon, it fell as though a new one was just beginning to rise. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. the whispering deep. The Grand Line was a sea of contradictions. One moment, the waves were gentle as a lover's sigh, the next, they raged with the fury of a scorned god. Islands with seasons that defied logic appeared and vanished like mirages, and the magnetic pull of the archipelago played havoc with any normal compass. For the old fisherman, it would have been a suicide run. For Naruto, it was a conversation. He sat at the prow of the small boat, his eyes closed, his hands resting on the weathered wood. He wasn't sailing the vessel. He was asking it where to go. He extended his sage energy, that perfect blend of his own life force and the natural world, into the currents beneath the hull, into the winds that filled the single sail. The ocean responded. It guided him through treacherous whirlpools with gentle nudges. The winds shifted to carry him past waterspouts that danced on the horizon, and schools of curious fish swam alongside. Their collective consciousness a low, happy hum against his senses. He was not a conqueror of the sea, he was a welcome guest. For days he traveled, sustained by the energy of the natural world and the occasional fish that would leap obligingly from the water into his hands. The song in his soul grew stronger, a constant, beautiful, and deeply melancholic melody that pulled him forward. It was a siren's call, but not one of temptation. It was a plea, a whisper of a promise that echoed through the crushing pressure of the deep. He knew he was getting close. The water itself was becoming saturated with the song's sorrow. He reached the spot the log pose of this world would have pointed to, the red line, the impossible continent that circled the globe. But his destination wasn't on the surface. It was below, directly below. The old fisherman had told him tales of a special coating that allowed ships to travel to the ocean floor, to the sunken island of the fishmen. Naruto had listened politely, but he had no need for such things. He stood, his black cloak fluttering in the sea breeze, and placed a hand on the surface of the water. "Stay with me," he murmured, not to himself, but to the air and the water. He channeled his chakra, not with explosive force, but with the delicate touch of a master painter. The air around the small boat shimmered, coalescing into a sphere of shimmering golden energy. It was not a simple bubble of trapped air, it was a self-sustaining biosphere, the energy within it generating its own oxygen, its own gentle pressure. It pulsed with a soft, warm light, a miniature sun in the vast blue. With a final, gentle push of his will, the boat began to sink. It descended past the turbulent surface waters into a world of serene, twilight blue. Sunlight filtered down, creating ethereal rays that danced in the deep. Strange, beautiful fish with glowing fins swam past the bubble, their curiosity piqued by the warm light. "He-pa," said the skeletons of colossal creatures that had made the abyss their grave and forests of coral that glowed with a soft, internal luminescence. The journey was silent, peaceful, a stark contrast to the violent reputation of the Grand Line. And then he felt it. Not just the song, but life. Tens of thousands of life forces, a bustling, vibrant city of souls, hidden beneath 10,000 meters of water. At the very center of it all, a single presence shone brighter, sadder, and infinitely more powerful than all the others combined. The source of the song. The heart of the sea. His bubble broke he surface of the island's own air pocket with a soft hiss, emerging into a cavern of breathtaking scale. The light was not from the sun, but from the glowing coral and bioluminescent organisms that dotted the immense space, casting a soft, dreamy glow over everything. Ryugu Palace, a magnificent structure of pink coral and white towers that seemed to be woven from the sea itself, dominated the view. It was a place of impossible beauty. Yet Naruto's senses immediately picked up the undercurrent of tension, the quiet desperation that clung to the place like a shroud. Inside the opulent halls of Ryugu Palace, King Neptune, a coelacanth fish man of immense size with a flowing white beard and a golden trident, paced the throne room floor. His 3 sons, the princes, stood by, their expressions grim. Fukabashi, the eldest, a shark-fish man with a serious demeanor, had his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the reinforced walls of the hard-shell tower, visible through a grand window. "The reverie approaches," Neptune rumbled, his voice echoing the deep currents. "The invitation has arrived. They expect a delegation. They expect her. We cannot take Shirahoshi to the surface, father," Fukabashi said, his voice tight. "Not with things as they are. It's too dangerous. Dekan is getting more brazen. His attacks are becoming more frequent. That madman, Ryuboshi, the orphish merman, slammed a fist into his palm. If I could just get my hands on him for 5 minutes. It is the prophecy that worries me, Manbashi, the sunfish merman, added, his usually cheerful face drawn with worry. Madame Charlie foretold that a man in a straw hat would destroy this island. But she also spoke of another, a figure of the sun who would guide the princess to her destiny. It's all so confusing. Neptune sighed, a sound like the shifting of tectonic plates. My daughter, my sweet Shirahoshi, caged in a tower for 10 years. All because of this power she cannot control, this legacy she never asked for. He looked at his sons. His kingly authority momentarily replaced by the raw pain of a father. We are royalty. We command the armies of the sea. Yet we cannot protect one gentle girl from the obsession of a lunatic and the greed of the world above. In that very tower, Shirahoshi wept. She was a giantess, a mermaid of such scale that her bed was the size of a small cottage. Her hair, a cascade of light pink, flowed around her like a personal sea, and her tears, each one larger than a cannonball, splashed onto the floor, threatening to flood the room. She was not crying from any new pain, but from the old, familiar ache of loneliness and fear. Outside her reinforced window, the evidence of Vanderdecken's obsession was everywhere. Axes, knives, and swords were embedded in the tower's coral walls. Each one a love letter of psychotic intent. For a decade, she had been a prisoner in her own home, her only companion the loyal Megalo, a giant shark who now swam anxiously in circles within her room's massive space. She hummed softly, a tune she didn't even realize she was making. It was the song that had crossed worlds, the unconscious expression of her soul's deepest wish, a wish for freedom, for a friend. For someone to see past the feared power of the mermaid princess and see just her. Her humming was cut short by a series of sharp, whistling sounds. A new barrage, daggers, swords, and finally, a massive, chained anchor, all hurtling through the water towards her window with unerring accuracy, guided by the curse of the mark fruit. Princess! The royal guards outside shouted in alarm, their spears useless against the flying projectiles. Inside the palace, Fukabashi's eyes widened. He's attacking again. To the tower. The 3 princes shot through the water corridors of the palace, their speed a blur of motion. Shirahoshi screamed, squeezing her eyes shut, her massive body trembling as she braced for the inevitable crash, for the shattering of her only sanctuary. Megalo swam in front of her, ready to take the impact, a brave but futile gesture. The crash never came. There was a dull, heavy thud, but no explosion of coral, no shattering of the window. Cautiously, Shirahoshi opened one of her enormous, beautiful blue eyes. The anchor, a piece of rusted metal large enough to hold a battleship, was hovering just inches from the window. And standing on one of its flukes, as casually as if he were standing on solid ground, was a man. He had hair the color of the sun, eyes the color of the sky above the waves, and he was holding the anchor in place with one outstretched hand. His fingers barely touching the metal. His black cloak billowed softly in a wind that did not exist. Naruto looked from the anchor to the terrified girl inside and offered a small, reassuring smile. With a slight push, he sent the anchor tumbling away, where it sank harmlessly into a coral garden below. He then stepped off, right through the already cracked window, landing silently on the floor of her room. Megalo growled, moving protectively in front of the princess, but Naruto paid the shark no mind. His entire focus was on the giant mermaid. He could feel it now, up close. The immense, untamed power bubbling within her, the power of the legendary Poseidon, the ability to command the sea kings. But beneath that, he felt her heart. A heart so gentle, so kind, so full of fear and loneliness it was almost painful to behold. This was the source of the song. This was the person he had been called to find. Shirahoshi stared, her fear momentarily forgotten, replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. He was so small, yet he had stopped the anchor. He wasn't looking at her with fear or greed or awe at her power. He was just looking at her. His blue eyes were kind, and they held a depth that seemed to understand everything she had ever felt. I heard you, Naruto said, his voice soft, yet it filled the vast room easily. It was a sad song, but a beautiful one. The words broke through a dam of emotion that had been building for 10 years. Her lip quivered, and the tears began to well up again, massive and shimmering. You heard me," she whispered, her voice a childlike treble that was at odds with her sighs. "I did," he said, taking a step closer. "And I came to keep a promise." As the first giant tear rolled down her cheek, Naruto raised a hand. A warm, golden aura enveloped him, pulsing gently. It wasn't hot or threatening, but soothing, like the first rays of dawn after a long night. The energy washed over Shirahoshi, and a wave of calm she had never known settled over her. Her fear receded, her sorrow softened, the tears stopped before they could fall, evaporating in the warmth of his presence. She felt safe, for the first time since her mother's death. The crushing weight on her soul lifted, just a little. It was at that moment that the doors to the tower burst open. Fukabashi, Ryuboshi, and Manbashi stormed in, tridents at the ready. Expecting to find their sister under attack, they stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes wide, taking in the impossible scene. Their weeping, terrified sister was calm, her eyes fixed on a human intruder who stood in her room radiating a gentle, golden light. A human who had somehow bypassed every guard and barrier on the island. "Who are you?" Fukabashi demanded, his voice a dangerous growl as he leveled his trident at Naruto. "How did you get in here? Step away from the princess." Naruto didn't turn to face him. He kept his eyes on Shirahoshi, who was looking at her brothers with a new, uncertain expression. Before he could answer, a small, choked voice spoke up, a voice the princess hadn't heard speak to a stranger in a decade. "Brother, wait," Shirahoshi whispered. He stopped it. He made the noise go away. She wasn't talking about Dekkan's attack. She was talking about the storm in her own heart. Naruto finally turned, his gaze sweeping over the three powerful mermen. There was no hostility in his eyes, only a quiet, unshakable resolve. His presence, even without the golden aura, was immense. It was the calm at the center of a hurricane, a power so vast it had no need for aggression. From outside, through the broken window, a furious, distorted voice could be heard, broadcast by a Den Mushi. "Unforgivable. Who is that man? Who dares touch my beautiful Shirahoshi? I'll kill you. I'll kill you all." Vander Dekkan's distant, impotent rage echoed across the water. Naruto's gaze shifted towards the sound, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He then looked back at Fukabashi, at the drawn tridents, at the stunned but protective faces of the royal family. He made no grand gesture, no threat. He simply stated a fact, his voice calm and absolute, a declaration. That changed the fate of the entire island. "She will not be a prisoner any longer," he said, his eyes locking with the eldest prince's. The threats against her stopped now. Miles away, on the sun-drenched, manicured lawns of Mary Geoise, the holy land of the celestial dragons, a shadowy figure sat behind a large, ornate desk. One of the 5 elders, the highest authority of the world government, placed a report down. His long, white hair was braided, and his face was a roadmap of ancient wisdom and ruthless pragmatism. "Commodore Brannick's report from the East Blue," he said to the other 4 figures in the room. Their faces obscured by shadow. "He speaks of an anomaly. A man named Naruto Uzumaki who pacified a sovereign Class C king and demonstrated abilities outside the known spectrum of devil fruits or haki." Another elder, a bald man with a massive scar and a long sword across his lap, grunted. "Brannick is a zealot, but he is not prone to fantasy. He claims this man stopped his Mato blade with 2 fingers. An exaggeration, most likely," a third elder commented, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. But the energy signature the 153rd detected was real. It did not match any known source. "A new player has entered the game," the first elder mused, his fingers steepling. "In this age of chaos, with the rise of the worst generation and the instability of the 4 emperors, an unknown power of this magnitude cannot be left unchecked." He pressed a button on a small, black Den Mushi on his desk. "Dispatch Cipher Pol Igus 0. Their mission: locate this Naruto Uzumaki. Observe him, assess his capabilities, and if he proves to be a threat to the world's balance, eliminate him." In the darkness, the other 4 elders nodded in silent, unanimous agreement. The gears of the world government had begun to turn. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The King's Folly, the Sun's Resolve. Fukabashi's trident was a masterpiece of royal craftsmanship, imbued with the power of the sea. When he moved, the water itself seemed to move with him, coiling around the shaft, adding its immense weight to his attack. He didn't hesitate. The safety of his sister was paramount, and this intruder, this surface dweller who had appeared from nowhere, was an unknown variable in an equation that was already far too dangerous. He lunged, his speed blurring his form into a turquoise streak. The tip of his trident aimed directly at Naruto's heart. It was a strike meant to end the confrontation before it began. Naruto didn't move. He simply watched the prince approach, his blue eyes calm and assessing. As the trident tip, shimmering with aquatic power, was about to pierce his cloak, he raised his right hand. He didn't catch the weapon. He didn't block it. His palm simply met the point. There was no impact, no shockwave. The ferocious momentum, the kinetic energy of a charging royal merman backed by the pressure of the deep sea, vanished. It was as if Fukabashi had thrust his trident into the concept of stillness itself. The weapon stopped dead, its tip resting gently in Naruto's palm, all its power, all its intent, utterly nullified. Fukabashi's eyes widened in disbelief. He pushed, straining every muscle in his powerful body, his feet digging into the floor of the tower. Nothing. The man didn't even seem to be exerting himself. It felt like trying to push over the ocean. You have a strong sense of duty, Naruto said, his voice even. You love your sister. That's good, but you're pointing your strength in the wrong direction. With a gentle twist of his wrist, he disarmed the prince. The trident spun from Fukabashi's grasp and flew across the room, embedding itself harmlessly in the far wall, next to where Ryuboshi and Manbashi stood frozen in shock. The display was so casual, so effortless, that it was more intimidating than any show of brute force could ever be. How? Fukabashi stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Before Naruto could answer, a voice boomed through the chamber, a voice that carried the weight of the crown and the depths of the sea. Unhand my daughter's protector and identify yourself, intruder. King Neptune floated into the room, his massive form filling the doorway. His golden trident was held at the ready, his expression a thunderous mask of royal fury. His gaze fell upon Naruto, a tiny figure before the weeping form of his giant daughter. And his rage intensified. You dare to trespass in Ryugu Palace. To enter the hard shell tower and lay your hands on my son. Neptune's voice was a deep-sea tremor. You surface dwellers are all the same. Your arrogance knows no bounds. Father, wait, Shirahoshi cried out, her voice filled with a desperate plea. He is not a bad person. He made the scary things stop. Neptune's gaze softened for a moment as he looked at his daughter, but his suspicion of the outsider remained. Scary things, child, this man is the scary thing. A human, here, in the heart of our kingdom. He is a threat. Naruto turned to face the king, his expression unreadable. He looked at the massive fish man, at the powerful trident, at the royal guards arrayed behind him, and he felt a familiar weariness. He had seen this before, in his own world. Leaders who, in their desire to protect, built cages. Kings who mistook fear for safety. A threat. Naruto's voice was quiet, yet it silenced the king's tirade. Tell me, King Neptune, for 10 years your daughter has been a prisoner in this room. For 10 years, a madman has been allowed to terrorize her, to throw his obsession at her walls day and night. You have an army, you rule a kingdom, and yet, you have done nothing to stop him. You have only hidden her away. So I ask you, who is the real threat to her? The man who torments her from afar, or the father who keeps her locked in a cage and calls it protection? The words struck Neptune like a physical blow. The fury in his eyes faltered, replaced by a flicker of shame and pain. The princes looked down, unable to meet Naruto's gaze. He had spoken the truth, a truth they had lived with for a decade but had never dared to voice so bluntly. You know nothing of our struggles. Fukabashi retorted, his pride stung. Vanderdecken is cursed. He can never be caught. We have tried. His power allows him to track the princess no matter where she goes. So you gave up, Naruto stated. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple observation. You decided the problem was unsolvable, so you chose to manage the symptoms instead of curing the disease. You built stronger walls. You posted more guards. And every day, your daughter's world became smaller, while her fear grew larger. Her song reached across worlds, King Neptune. That's how much she was hurting. Did you ever once hear it? Shirahoshi gasped, her huge eyes welling with fresh tears, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of recognition. He understood. This stranger, this small man from the sunlit world, understood the depths of her silent suffering in a way her own family, for all their love, never had. King Neptune lowered his trident, the royal anger draining from him, leaving only the weary sorrow of a father. What would you have us do? He is a ghost. We cannot find him. Naruto's gaze shifted, looking past the walls of the tower, past the glowing coral of the island, out into the dark, crushing abyss of the sea beyond. His senses, a perfect fusion of sage mode and his own innate abilities, expanded, sweeping through the water. He felt the life forces of every fish, every crustacean, every wandering sea king for miles in every direction. And among them, he felt a single, discordant signature. A twisted, obsessive heart pumping with malice and frustration. It was on a decaying, barnacle-encrusted ship, miles away and several thousand feet above them. You couldn't find him, Naruto said, his eyes refocusing on the stunned royal family. But I can. Just as he spoke, the water outside the window darkened. A shadow fell over the tower. Vanderdecken, enraged by the presence of another man near his target, and driven to a new level of insanity, had made his boldest move yet. Using his cursed abilities, he had hurled his entire ship, the legendary Flying Dutchman, directly at Fishman Island. It was now plummeting through the ocean, a multi-ton weapon of wood and steel aimed squarely at the hard-shell tower, intended to crush Shirahoshi and her mysterious guest in a single, cataclysmic blow. An island-wide alarm began to shriek, a high-pitched wail of pure panic. The Flying Dutchman, Manbashi screamed, pointing a shaking finger out the window. He's thrown the entire ship. The royal family stared in horror. The ship was growing larger by the second, a harbinger of absolute destruction. There was no time to evacuate, no barrier strong enough to stop it. This was the end. Naruto sighed. This is getting repetitive. He turned his back on the plummeting vessel and faced Shirahoshi. I need you to do something for me, he said, his voice cutting through her rising panic. I need you to stop being afraid. Not of him. Not of them. He gestured vaguely at her family. Not even of yourself. I'm going to end this now. And when it's over, I want you to swim outside. I want you to see the sea for yourself. He then turned back towards the window. Towards the approaching apocalypse. The Flying Dutchman was now so close it filled the entire view, its decaying hull and tattered sails a vision of nautical horror. Naruto raised one hand. He didn't gather energy in a swirling ball. He didn't perform any elaborate jutsu. From the palm of his hand, a small, black sphere, no bigger than a marble, materialized. It was a perfect, absolute black, a sphere of pure, condensed chakra that seemed to drink the light around it. A truth-seeking orb. It was a fraction of the power he had wielded in his prime, but here, in this world, it was the power of a god. He flicked his thumb. The black orb shot forward. It didn't streak through the water with explosive force. It simply moved, silent and inexorable. It passed through the tower's window without shattering it, the coral and glass parting around its passage as if they didn't exist. It traveled the remaining distance to the Flying Dutchman in less than a second. It did not strike the ship. It passed through the hull, through the decks, through the main mast, leaving no mark. It emerged from the other side and continued on into the deep, dark water for another 100 yards before it stopped. Then, Naruto clenched his fist. The orb expanded, not in a fiery explosion of heat and light, but in a silent, blossoming sphere of pure, disintegrating force. Everything within a 50-meter radius of the orb simply ceased to exist. Not blown apart, but unmade. Wiped from reality on a fundamental level. The blast was perfectly contained, a silent, surgical detonation in the heart of the sea. On the Flying Dutchman, Vanderdecken was screaming in triumph, his final, ultimate love letter about to be delivered. One moment, he was standing on his deck, watching the tower grow closer. The next, the entire central section of his ship, from keel to crow's nest, vanished. The vessel was instantly bisected, the bow and stern collapsing inwards into the newly formed void. The sea rushed in, And the two halves of the legendary ghost ship began their final, ignominious plunge to the ocean floor. Vanderdecken, caught in the sudden, violent implosion, was knocked unconscious, his cursed GI. Ven connection to Shirahoshi severed as his mind went blank. Back in the tower, the royal family stared, their mouths agape, their minds refusing to process what their eyes had just seen. The ship, the island-killing threat, was gone. One moment it was there, the next, it was two pieces of sinking wreckage. There had been no sound, no shockwave, nothing. Just a silent, absolute act of erasure. Naruto turned away from the window, dusting his hands as if he'd just finished a minor chore. He looked at the stunned faces of the king and his sons. Problem solved, he said simply. Silence reigned for a long, heavy moment. King Neptune looked from the sinking wreckage on the horizon to the calm, blonde man standing before him. He looked at his daughter, who was staring at Naruto not with fear, but with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. The prophecy, a figure of the son who would guide the princess to her destiny. The king's trident clattered to the floor. He bowed. It was not the shallow, political bow of a monarch, but the deep, reverent bow of a man who knew he was in the presence of something far beyond his understanding. His sons, seeing their father's actions, followed suit, owing their heads in respect and gratitude. You have my deepest, most humble thanks, Neptune rumbled, his voice thick with emotion. You have done in moments what we could not do in a decade. Please, tell us your name. Tell us who you are. Naruto's gaze softened. He looked at Shirahoshi, at the hope that was beginning to dawn in her eyes, a light that was far more beautiful than the glowing coral of the island. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said, and I came here to keep a promise. It's time for the mermaid princess to see the sun. Deep within the subterranean levels of Mary Geoise, in a cold, sterile training room. A woman with hair as white as bleached bone finished her kata. Every movement was precise, lethal, devoid of any wasted motion. She wore the stark white, form-fitting uniform of Cypher Pol Igus Zero. Her face partially obscured by a porcelain mask shaped like a stoic, impassive god. A subordinate entered the room and bowed low. Commander Serafina, we have received our orders from the Gorosei. The woman, Serafina, did not turn. She sheathed her blade with an audible click that echoed in the silent room. The target, an individual named Naruto Uzumaki. Last seen in the East Blue. He is to be considered a threat to the world's balance. Serafina finally turned. Her visible eye was a piercing, icy blue, utterly devoid of emotion. It was the eye of a scalpel. A tool designed for one purpose. To excise anything the world government deemed a cancer. Balance is not a state of being, she said, her voice a cold, melodic whisper. It is an act of continuous, aggressive purification. Find this anomaly. I will prepare for the harvest. The subordinate shivered, not from the cold of the room, but from the chilling finality in her voice. The world's deadliest weapon had just been given a target. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. A swim in the sun. The silence in the hard-shell tower was a living thing. It was composed of the stunned awe of a king, the bewildered respect of three princes, and the quiet, dawning hope of a princess who had forgotten what hope felt like. King Neptune, a being of immense physical and political power, remained bowed, a mound. Toin of a man humbled before a force he could not comprehend. Naruto paid their reverence little mind. His focus was singular. He turned back to Shirahoshi, his expression softening as he met her enormous, tear-filled eyes. The awe was there, but beneath it was a fragile, trembling question. Is it really over? You made a promise, she whispered, her voice barely a breath, yet it was the loudest sound in the chamber. Naruto smiled, a genuine, warm smile that seemed to brighten the room more than the glowing coral. I did, and I'm a man of my word. So, are you ready for a swim? The question, so simple and so profound, hung in the air. King Neptune straightened up, his royal composure returning, though his eyes still held a deep, unsettled respect. Wait, please, Sir Uzumaki, you must understand, it is not that simple. It seemed pretty simple to me, Naruto replied, his gaze not leaving Shirahoshi. My daughter, she is not just a princess, Neptune rumbled, gesturing with a massive hand. She carries the blood of Poseidon. She is a power the world has not seen in 800 years. The surface world, the celestial dragons, they would see her as a weapon to be controlled or a threat to be eliminated. To take her to the surface is to paint a target on her back for the entire world government. She already has a target on her back, Naruto countered calmly. You just kept her in one place so the archer wouldn't have to move. The only thing that changes now is that the target is going to be moving. And the archer is going to find out what happens when I'm standing in the way. Fukabashi stepped forward, his expression torn. He is right, father. We have lived in fear for too long. But, Sir Uzumaki, what you propose is an act that could be seen as a declaration of war against the humans. Let them see it however they want, Naruto said, his easygoing tone hardening into tempered steel. I'm not here to play politics. I'm here because a girl who has never hurt anyone was so lonely and afraid that her heart cried out across dimensions. Everything else is just noise. He looked back to Shirahoshi, his voice softening again. It's your choice, princess. I won't force you, but I'm offering you a chance to see the real sky, to feel the real sun. Just for a little while. I will not let anything happen to you. It was the first real choice she'd been given in a decade. Her entire life had been a series of reactions to fear, her mother's death, Dekkan's obsession, her own terrifying power. But this was not a reaction. It was an action, an invitation. She looked at her father's worried face, her brother's conflicted expressions, and then at the small, blonde man who radiated a quiet confidence that was more reassuring than all the armies of the sea. A single, shimmering tear, the size of a melon, rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. Yes, she whispered, her voice finding a sliver of strength she didn't know she possessed. I want to go. I want to see the sun, with you. Naruto-sama. The decision was made. King Neptune looked as though he wanted to argue, to plead, to forbid it, but the words died in his throat. He saw the look in his daughter's eyes. A spark of life that had been extinguished 10 years ago, now rekindled. To deny her this would be a cruelty far greater than any danger the surface world could pose. He finally gave a slow, solemn nod. Very well, Fukabashi, you and your brothers will escort them. Take the entire royal guard. Create a perimeter of 10 kilometers and... No, Naruto interrupted gently but firmly. No guards, no perimeter, no army. That draws attention. It screams that you're hiding something valuable. We go alone, just the two of us. It will be faster, quieter, and safer. Trust me, trust him. A few hours ago, the idea would have been insane. Now, looking at the man who had erased a ghost ship with a gesture, it seemed like the most logical thing in the world. The royal family could only nod in stunned agreement. Naruto walked to the broken window and gestured for Shirahoshi to follow. She moved with a hesitant grace, her immense size causing the very tower to tremble slightly. As she reached the opening, Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder. Again, that warm, golden energy flowed from him, not forming a bubble this time, but a thin, shimmering coat that enveloped her entire body. From the tips of her pink hair to the delicate fins of her tail. This will keep the pressure from being a problem, he explained. And it will help you breathe when we get to the surface. Just relax. He then stepped out of the window into the open water, turning to face her. He created a small, stable platform of condensed chakra for himself to stand on. He held out his hand. Shirahoshi, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilarating excitement, reached out her own, her hand comically large compared to his. As her fingers touched his palm, he gave her a reassuring squeeze, and they began their ascent. The journey upwards was a silent symphony of light and life. For Shirahoshi, it was a revelation. She had lived her entire life surrounded by the sea, but had only ever seen it through the thick, distorted glass of her tower. Now, she was in it. She saw the true, vibrant colors of the coral reefs, the playful dance of sea turtles, the majestic, slow drift of a whale shark. Her senses were overwhelmed with the beauty she had been denied. It's so beautiful, she breathed, the words muffled by the water but carried clearly to Naruto's senses. The world usually is, Naruto said, his voice resonating through the water via his own chakra. When you're not looking at it from inside a prison. She looked at him, at his kind eyes and gentle smile. Why are you doing this for me, Naruto-sama? You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied. I know what it's like to be lonely. To have a power inside you that makes people afraid, that makes them keep their distance. He thought of his own childhood. Of the glares and the whispers, of the crushing weight of being the Jinchuriki. No one should have to feel that way. Especially not someone with a heart as gentle as yours. His words touched a part of her soul that had been starved for understanding. He wasn't just saving her from a physical threat, he was seeing her, the real her, the scared girl hidden inside the legendary weapon. She found herself talking, the words tumbling out in a rush that had been pent up for a decade. She told him about her mother, Queen Otahime, and her dream of a world where humans and fish men could live together in peace. She told him about her promise to her mother to not hate the human who had killed her, a promise that had been so hard to keep while locked away in fear. Naruto listened patiently, his presence a comforting anchor in the turbulent sea of her memories. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman, he said when she finished. Holding on to Hop, in a world full of hate, that's the hardest kind of strength. It's a strength you have too, you know. Me, she asked, her voice full of disbelief. But I am a crybaby. I am weak. Crying doesn't make you weak, he told her. His voice firm. Being afraid doesn't make you weak. Weakness is letting that fear and sadness turn into hate. Weakness is giving up. You've never done that. You've held on to your mother's promise. You've kept your heart gentle. In my book, that makes you one of the strongest people I've ever met. As they ascended, the water around them began to change. The deep, twilight blue gave way to a brighter turquoise, and then to a brilliant, dazzling azure. A ceiling appeared above them, a shimmering, dancing surface of pure light. Shirahoshi stared at it, mesmerized. Get ready, Naruto said softly. With a final, gentle pull, they broke the surface. The sensation was overwhelming. First came the air, fresh and crisp and tasting of salt and freedom. Then came the light. It wasn't the soft, diffused glow of the coral, but a brilliant, powerful, and unbelievably warm radiance that bathed everything in a golden sheen. The sun, it was real. It felt like a warm blanket on her skin, chasing away the perpetual chill of the deep. She looked up and saw the sky, a vast, endless dome of the purest blue, dotted with clouds like puffs of white cotton. It was bigger, so bigger than she could have ever imagined. Seabirds cried out as they wheeled overhead, their calls a joyful, chaotic song. Shirahoshi's mind went blank. All the fear, all the sorrow, all the years of confinement were washed away by the sheer, breathtaking majesty of the world above the waves. Tears, huge and sparkling, streamed down her face, but this time, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She laughed, a sound as clear and beautiful as the ringing of crystal bells, a sound that had not been heard from her in a decade. Naruto stood on the water beside her, watching her, a profound sense of peace settling over him. This was why he was here. This single, perfect moment of liberation. This was the first note in a new song, a song of freedom. Hundreds of miles away, in the port of Shell's town, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. Two figures in immaculate white uniforms stood on the pier where Commodore Brannock's ship was being repaired. The Marines, including Brannock himself, stood at a stiff, fearful attention, a stark contrast to their usual disciplined arrogance. The central figure was Commander Serafina. Her porcelain mask was void of emotion, and her icy blue eyes scanned the area with an unnerving, analytical intensity. Her partner, a tall, powerfully built man with dark skin and a mask shaped like a snarling oni, was known only as Juggernaut. The reports state the subject, Naruto Uzumaki. Stopped your blade with 2 fingers, Commodore. Serafina's voice was a melodic whisper that carried an edge of cold steel. An amusing piece of hyperbole, I assume. Brannock, his pride still smarting, swallowed hard. It is no hyperbole, Commander. It is the truth. The force I exerted was enough to cleave a warship in 2. He stopped it, without effort. Serafina tilted her head slightly, her gaze drifting to the spot where Naruto had stood. She closed her eyes. The world fell away, and she saw it not with sight, but with a different sense, a finely honed perception that was the pinnacle of the world government's secret training. She could perceive the faint, residual echoes of powerful will, the psychic imprint left behind by individuals of immense power. Most hockey users left a faint, fleeting trace. What she sensed here was different. It was not a trace, it was a lingering presence. It was warm, vibrant, and so overwhelmingly vast it was Li K trying to sense the footprint of the sun. It was calm, yet it held a latent power that made the very air seem to hum with respect. Her eyes snapped open. The reports are not an exaggeration, she stated. A flicker of something, not surprise, but cold, professional interest, in her voice. The will signature here is unprecedented. It is not aggressive, but its sheer scale is of the highest threat level. Juggernaut grunted. So, we hunt. We do not hunt. Serafina corrected him, her voice precise. We dissect. We analyze. And then we purge. She walked to the edge of the pier, her gaze falling upon the small, unassuming fishing boat that Naruto had used. The old fisherman was being questioned, but he was senile and spoke only of a sun spirit, who gave him a lucky charm. Serafina ignored him. She focused on the boat. A faint, golden echo of the same will signature clung to the wood. He traveled by sea, she murmured. This vessel was his transport. The residual energy trail is faint, but clear. It leads towards the Sabayati archipelago, the gateway to the New World, and to Fishman Island. She turned to Brannick, her authority absolute. Commodore, your fleet is now under my command. Prepare a vessel for immediate departure. We have a trail to follow. Brannick saluted sharply. Yes, Commander. As she walked away, Juggernaut fell into step beside her. If his power is as great as the signature suggests, he rumbled, his voice a deep bass, a direct confrontation may be unadvisable. All things can be broken, Serafina replied, her voice as cold as the abyss. We are Aegis Zero. We are the scalpel of the gods. And it is our duty to excise tumors before they can spread. This, Naruto Uzumaki, is a tumor of hope in a world that requires order. We will find him, and we will remind him that even the sun can be extinguished. Back on the tranquil surface of the Grand Line, the joy of the moment was interrupted by a deep, guttural moan that vibrated through the water. Shirahoshi's happiness was instantly replaced by a flicker of her old fear. From the depths, a colossal shadow was rising. It was a sea king, even larger than the one from Shell's town, its form monstrous and its single, baleful eye filled with a primal hunger. But as it broke the surface, its roar died in its throat. It saw the giant mermaid, the fated princess of the seas, and its mind was filled with an instinctual, ancient reverence. Then it saw the man standing beside her, the small figure radiating a warmth that felt achingly familiar, a presence it knew in its very soul. The conqueror, the sun. The Sea King gave a low, rumbling croon of greeting and bowed its massive head. Others began to rise from the depths, drawn by the presence of their queen and her companion. Soon, Naruto and Shirahoshi were surrounded by a silent, reverent court of the largest, most powerful creatures in the world. Shirahoshi stared, her fear melting into disbelief and then into a profound, bone-deep understanding. This was the power she had been so afraid of. This was her legacy. And it wasn't monstrous. It was beautiful. The Sea Kings weren't beasts of destruction. They were her subjects, her friends. Naruto placed a hand on the snout of the nearest Sea King, a silent communion passing between them. He looked at Shirahoshi, at the tears of joy now mixed with tears of self-discovery. See, he said softly, they're not afraid of you. They love you. This isn't a curse, Shirahoshi. It's a part of who you are. And it's nothing to be afraid of. It was a turning point, a fundamental shift in her existence. For the first time, Shirahoshi looked at her own power not as a source of fear, but as a part of herself. And with Naruto by her side, she felt, for the first time, that she might one day be able to control it. Their peaceful moment was broken by a different kind of vibration. Naruto's head snapped up, his senses, always alert, catching the faint but distinct tremor from 10,000 meters below. It wasn't the natural movement of the sea. It was the discordant clang of steel, the muffled roar of cannon fire, and the collective scream of fear and anger. Trouble. What is it? Shirahoshi asked, seeing the sudden seriousness in his expression. Something's wrong back home, he said, his brow furrowed. The joy of your people has been replaced by the sound of fighting. He didn't need to say anything else. Their idyllic swim was over. With a shared look of understanding, they dove, leaving the sun and the sky behind, and plunged back towards the deep. They moved with a newfound urgency. The silent escort of sea kings following in their wake, a royal procession returning to a kingdom in turmoil. Naruto's presence had solved one problem, but it seemed to have ignited a fuse on another, far more volatile one. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. A Kingdom of Echoes. The descent was the inverse of their joyful ascent. They moved with a speed that churned the water behind them into a frothing wake. The silent, majestic sea kings, no longer a court of peaceful subjects but a grim procession of living warships, followed effortlessly. Shirahoshi's newfound joy had been replaced by a cold dread. But it was different from the fear she had known before. The terror of the tower had been a passive, helpless thing. This was an active fear, a fear for her people, her family, and its. Harpened her senses and hardened her resolve. The sounds of battle grew from a faint, distant tremor into a cacophony that vibrated through her very bones. As they neared the island's protective bubble, the scene of chaos unfolded. Gyeongcord Plaza, the vibrant heart of the island, was a war zone. The Neptune army, proud soldiers in their coral-plated armor, were fighting a desperate battle against a horde of fishman pirates. Their bodies grotesquely swollen with muscle, their eyes burning with a rabid, drug-fueled hatred. At the center of it all, standing atop the central coral platform, was a great white shark fishman. Hody Jones. His body was immense, his skin pale and scarred, and a jagged scar ran down his left eye. He wasn't just fighting. He was conducting an orchestra of violence, his laughter a cruel, grating sound that echoed over the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded. Beside him, his officers, a venomous blue-ringed octopus, a hulking Japanese wabagong, a swift swordfish merman, and others, cut through the royal guards with brutal efficiency. King Neptune and the princes were in the thick of it, their royal might a bulwark against the tide of insurrection. Fukabashi was a whirlwind of motion, his trident felling rebels 3 at a time. Ryuboshi and Manbashi fought back to back, a surprisingly effective duo of grace and brute force. And the king himself was a force of nature, his massive trident sweeping away dozens of enemies with every swing. But they were outnumbered, and for every rebel they struck down, 2 more seemed to take their place, their strength unnaturally potent. A giant Den Mushi stood near Hody, broadcasting his voice across the entire island. "Behold, brothers of Fish-Man Island." Hody's voice boomed, a mixture of righteous fury and charismatic venom. "Your royal family, who hid in their palace while a madman terrorized our princess. Who preached peace and coexistence with the human scum who enslave our kind. Today, they show their true colors, fighting against their own people to protect their failed legacy." He pointed a clawed finger towards the palace. "And where is the princess they claim to protect? Gone, spirited away by a human. The ultimate betrayal. King Neptune has handed the living weapon of Poseidon, our island's greatest treasure, over to our greatest enemy. He has sold our future for his own weakness." His words were poison, but they were effective. Naruto could feel the morale of the royal guards wavering, the seeds of doubt sprouting in the hearts of the civilian onlookers who were hiding in the surrounding coral forests. Hody wasn't just staging a coup, he was rewriting the island's narrative in real time. "He's lying," Shirahoshi whispered, her body trembling with a rage she'd never felt before. "He's twisting everything. That's what men like him do," Naruto said, his own voice cold. "They feed on pain and call it strength. It's time to change the story." They didn't enter through the official gates. They rose from below, directly into the center of Gyeongcord Plaza's main waterway. One moment, there was only churning water and chaos. The next, a head of brilliant blonde hair broke the surface, followed by the enormous, beautiful, and utterly impossible form of Princess Shirahoshi. And behind them, the Sea Kings rose. Dozens of them. Their colossal heads emerged from the water, their ancient eyes, each one larger than a ship's wheel, fixed on the battle. They made no sound, no aggressive move. They simply appeared, a silent, terrifying jury of gods, bearing witness. The entire island fell silent. The fighting stopped. The clash of steel ceased. Hody Jones's broadcast cut off mid-rant. Every single combatant, rebel and royalist alike, froze, their eyes wide with disbelief. The civilians peeking from their homes gasped. Princess Shirahoshi, their lost princess, their myth, their weapon, was here. And she had not come alone. Hody Jones stared, his drug-addled mind struggling to process the scene. The human, the princess, and the living legends of the sea, all arrayed before him. His narrative, the story of a weak king and a stolen princess, had just been obliterated by an image of impossible power. Naruto stood on the water in front of Shirahoshi, his hands in his pockets, his expression unconcerned. He looked at Hody, at the artificial muscles, at the hate-filled eyes. He could sense the nature of Hody's power. It was a perversion of life energy, a rapid, cancerous growth that devoured the user's own lifespan in exchange for temporary might. It was a cheap, ugly imitation of true strength. "You must be Hody Jones," Naruto said, his voice calm, yet it carried across the silent plaza with perfect clarity. "I have to say, for a revolutionary, your methods are pretty unoriginal. Loud speeches, preying on old wounds, blaming everyone else for your own bitterness. It's a tired act." Hody's shock gave way to a surge of furious adrenaline. "Human, you dare show your face here? You have hypnotized our princess, turned her against her own people." He pointed his trident, a vicious, barbed weapon, at Naruto. "Brothers, do not be fooled by this display. This is a human trick. He is the enemy. Kill him. Kill them both." A few of the more fanatical pirates roared and charged, their minds too clouded by drugs and hate to comprehend their fear. They rushed towards Naruto, their weapons raised. Naruto didn't even look at them. He kept his eyes on Hody. The sea king closest to the plaza, a monstrous eel-like creature with a jaw that could crush a galleon, simply moved its head. It didn't attack, it just moved. Its immense shadow fell over the charging pirates. They skidded to a halt, their faces pale, as they stared up at a mouth lined with teeth the size of swords. They dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, trembling. "A trick," Naruto raised an eyebrow. "This isn't a trick, this is a choice." He turned his head slightly, his voice directed not at Hody, but at the people of the island, at the soldiers and the civilians. "He offers you a future built on hate. A future that requires you to despise a world you've never even seen. He tells you that strength is the power to destroy, to take revenge, to repay pain with more pain. He's offering you the same poison that has been killing your people for generations." He then gestured to Shirahoshi, who floated behind him. Her presence both terrifying and magnificent. "Your princess is not a weapon. She is not a prize to be stolen. She is the heart of this island. And her strength isn't in her power to command these creatures. It's in her ability to endure a decade of fear without once letting it turn into hatred. That is a power Hody Jones cannot even comprehend." Hody snarled, his muscles bulging as more of the energy steroids pumped through his veins. "Words. The empty words of a human. You know nothing of our suffering." "I know enough," Naruto said, his gaze hardening. "I know that hate only ever breeds more hate. It's a cycle, and the only way to break it is for someone to have the courage to choose a different path. Queen Otahime chose that path. You spit on her grave and call it progress." The mention of their martyred queen struck a chord. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This human, this outsider, spoke of their history, of their deepest ideals, with them. Or understanding than the fish man who claimed to be their savior. Seeing his support faltering, Hody made his final, desperate gambit. He would prove his strength, his righteousness, through an act of ultimate violence. He shot through the water, a white blur of pure, murderous intent, his trident aimed not at Naruto, but at the bigger, more symbolic target. He would strike down the princess and prove her to be a fragile, false idol. The royal family screamed her name. The crowd gasped in horror. Naruto moved. He didn't use an explosive burst of speed. He simply appeared between Hody and Shirahoshi, his back to her. His hand outstretched. He caught Hody's trident by the shaft, his grip absolute. Hody's drug-fueled charge came to a dead stop. "You've made two mistakes," Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. "First, you assumed power that you steal from your own life is the same as true strength." He squeezed. The metal of the trident groaned, bent, and then crumpled in his hand like wet paper. "Second," he continued, his blue eyes meeting Hody's shocked, hate-filled gaze, "you threatened someone I promised to protect." He let go of the ruined weapon and tapped Hody's chest with 2 fingers. It was not a punch. It was not a blast of chakra. It was a precise, controlled injection of pure, unadulterated nature energy. It was sage art, but it was not the creative, life-giving energy he used for healing or communication. This was the raw, untamable aspect of nature, the energy of a volcano, of a tsunami, of an earthquake. It was the world's immune system responding to a cancer. Hode's body convulsed. The energy steroids in his system, a mockery of life force, were instantly neutralized, turning inert. The stolen power vanished, but the price remained. His muscles deflated, his skin sagged, and in a matter of seconds, his unnaturally powerful body withered, aging decades. He became a frail, wizened old man, the hatred in his eyes now overshadowed by confusion and terror as the strength drained from his limbs. He collapsed to the floor, not unconscious, but utterly broken, a hollow shell of the revolutionary he had pretended to be. The entire plaza watched in stunned silence as their would-be conqueror was reduced to a decrepit husk by a single touch. The silence was broken by a single, hesitant voice. Mother's dream. It was Shirahoshi. She moved forward, past Naruto's protective stance. All eyes fell on her. She was trembling, but not from fear. She was looking at her people, at the faces of the fishmen and merfolk who had been swayed by Hode's lies. My mother, Queen Odahime. She dreamed of a day when we could live in the sun, she said, her voice shaking but growing stronger with every word. She gave her life for that dream. Hode Jones. He asks you to live in the dark. He asks you to hate people you have never met, to fear a world you do not know. That is not strength. That is not pride. It is a cage. The same kind of cage I lived in for 10 years. She looked towards Naruto, her eyes filled with a gratitude that was deeper than the ocean itself. This man, Naruto-sama, he showed me the sun. He did not hurt me. He did not try to use me. He protected me. He listened to me. He showed me that the fear I carried was a heavier chain than any wall. Please, do not choose the path of hatred. Do not let my mother's dream die in the echoes of old pain. Let us choose a new path. Let us choose hope. Her plea, so simple, so heartfelt, washed over the crowd. It was the voice of their lost princess, the voice of their martyred queen's legacy. It was the truth. The spell of Hode's hatred was broken. One by one, the rebel pirates dropped their weapons, the artificial rage in their eyes fading, replaced by a deep, collective shame. The coup was over, not ended by a battle, but by a choice. Later, as the Neptune army rounded up the now powerless officers of the new Fishman pirates, a captain of the royal guard approached Fukabashi, who was overseeing the cleanup. The captain's eyes darted towards Naruto, who was speaking quietly with Shirahoshi near the water's edge. Your Highness, the captain said in a low, urgent voice. A word, if I may. He discreetly showed the prince a small tattoo on the inside of his arm, a single, open eye. Veritas. Fukabashi's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the symbol of the secret, internal reformist faction. What is it? Hode Jones. The guard whispered. His rise was too fast. The sheer volume of energy steroids he possessed, it was unnatural. We have reason to believe he did not act alone. Oh, our sources suggest elements within the world government's intelligence network were aware of his plans. They may have even facilitated his supply. Fukabashi felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Why? Why would they do that? To create a crisis, the guard replied, his voice grim. An insurrection so terrible that Ryugu Kingdom would have no choice but to formally request the protection of the world government. Ceding our sovereignty in exchange for security. They wanted to destabilize us to the point of collapse, so they could absorb us without a fight. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just a random act of piracy. It was a calculated move in a global political game. And Naruto, by stopping it so effortlessly, had just thrown the entire board into disarray. The guard glanced at Naruto again. His arrival has changed everything. But it has also made this island the focus of some very powerful, very dangerous people. The ones who were pulling Hode's strings will not be pleased. Fukabashi looked over at Naruto, who was now laughing at something Shirahoshi said, the princess's own joyous, bell-like laughter echoing in the plaza. He had saved them, but in doing so, he had placed them all in the eye of a much larger storm. The battle for Fish-Man Island was over. The war for its soul had just begun. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. the weight of a promise. The aftermath of the failed coup was not celebratory. There was no grand parade, no cheering in the streets. Instead, a heavy, contemplative silence settled over Fishman Island. The citizens worked to clear the debris from Bioncourt Plaza. Their movements slow, their faces etched with a mixture of relief, shame, and a dawning, fragile hope. They had been led to the brink of self-destruction, and the quiet, blonde Huma, and who had pulled them back was now a figure of mythic proportions, spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. In the sea forest, a place of serene beauty and solemn memory, Naruto stood with Shirahoshi before the grave of Queen Otahime. The ancient sunlight filtering through the water cast shifting patterns on the simple, elegant stone. Megalo, the giant shark, swam in a lazy, protective circle nearby. His anxiety from the tower replaced with a quiet contentment. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Shirahoshi reached out a massive, trembling hand and gently traced the inscription on the tombstone. "She would have liked you," she said. Her voice soft. "My mother." She believed that the hatred between our peoples was not a wall, but a shadow. Something that would disappear if only someone had the courage to bring the light. She turned her enormous, beautiful eyes to him. "You were the light she dreamed of, Naruto-sama." Naruto leaned against the massive trunk of a sunlit tree, his arms crossed. "I'm not a light, princess. I'm just a guy who got tired of the dark." He looked at the gravestone, a flicker of a distant, personal pain in his eyes. "I've seen what hatred does. I've seen it turn friends into enemies, heroes into monsters. I've seen it burn down villages and poison hearts. Your mother was right. Fighting it with more hate is like trying to put out a fire with oil. It's a stupid, endless cycle. Was your home, was it like this?" she asked, her voice hesitant, afraid of prying into a wound she could sense was there. "In some ways," he admitted, his gaze becoming distant, as if looking through the water. Through the world itself, to a place she could never see. "We had our own wars, our own prejudices. We had so many funerals." He pushed the memories away, his focus returning to her. "But we also had people who, like your mother, refused to give up on peace. They're the ones who really matter. They're the ones you fight for." Shirahoshi felt a profound connection to him in that moment. He wasn't a god, or a myth, or a prophecy fulfilled. He was a person, one who had seen a world of pain and had chosen, again and again, to be kind. It was a strength she was just beginning to understand. "I am grateful," she said, the words carrying the weight of a decade of imprisonment. "But I am also afraid. Not for myself, anymore. For you, for my kingdom." Hody Jones was a pirate. "The people who govern the world above, they are not pirates. My father says they are far more dangerous." "They are," Naruto agreed, his tone matter of fact. "Powerful people don't like things they can't control. And right now, we are a very big, very uncontrollable thing." He saw the flicker of fear in her eyes and offered a reassuring smile. "But that's okay. I'm not here just to protect you, Shirahoshi. I'm here to help you find the strength to protect yourself. That power inside you, the one that calls the Sea Kings. It's not just a weapon. It's a voice. It's time you learned how to speak with it. Not just sing your sorrow." His words planted a seed in her heart. Not just of safety, but of purpose. She was not just a princess to be protected, but a queen in waiting, with a power that could shape the destiny of the seas. Their quiet moment was interrupted by a royal guard, who approached with a deep bow. "Sir Uzumaki, Princess Shirahoshi. His Majesty, King Neptune, requests your presence in the throne room. It is a matter of the utmost urgency." The throne room of Ryugu Palace was a chamber of suffocating tension. King Neptune sat on his massive throne, his usual benevolent expression replaced by a grim, stony mask. The three princes stood at his side, their faces taut with concern. The ministers of the left and right, two elderly and influential fishmen, wrung their hands, their expressions bordering on panic. Naruto entered with Shirahoshi floating gently behind him. He took a position not before the throne, but beside it, a subtle but clear statement of his new role. He was not a subject, but an ally. "What's happened?" Naruto asked, cutting through the formalities. Fukabashi stepped forward, his face grim. "I have received intelligence from a trusted source within the Marines. Hody's rebellion, it was not his own design. He was a pawn. He quickly recounted the information from the Veritas agent, the suspicious supply of energy steroids, the theory of a world government plot to destabilize the kingdom, to force them into subjugation through a manufactured crisis. The minister of the right, a portly catfish fish man, gasped, his face turning a pale green. This is a disaster, an absolute catastrophe. We have defied a covert operation by the world government itself. And this outsider, the minister of the left, a gaunt octopus fish man, added, pointing a trembling, suckered finger at Naruto. His presence here has turned their failed gambit into an open wound in their pride. They will not tolerate this. They will see us as co-conspirators. We must act at once. The right minister implored, bowing frantically towards the king. We must send a delegation to Mary Geoise. Apologize. Explain the situation. We must hand over the human, Uzumaki. As a sign of our good faith. It is the only way to avoid their wrath. King Neptune slammed the butt of his trident against the floor. The resulting boom silenced the minister's panicked chatter. The king rose to his full, towering height, his eyes blazing with a fire none of them had seen in years. Silence, he roared, his voice the sound of the abyss itself. For 10 years, I ruled this kingdom with fear. Fear of our enemies, fear of the surface, fear of our own legacy. That fear built a prison for my daughter and a cage for my people's dreams. No more. He looked from his cowardly ministers to Naruto. His expression one of absolute, unshakable resolve. Sir Uzumaki saved my daughter. He saved this kingdom from its own hatred. He is not a bargaining chip to be offered up to the wolves. He is the honored guest of Ryugu Kingdom. And we will not bow, we will not grovel, and we will not apologize for defending ourselves. It was the voice of a true king, a voice that had been buried under a decade of grief and anxiety. The princes looked at their father with a renewed sense of pride. Naruto listened to the exchange, his expression unchanged. When the king finished, all eyes turned to him. What is your counsel, Sir Uzumaki? Neptune asked, his voice now calm and steady. What is our next move? Naruto pushed himself off the wall he was leaning against. My plan is simple, he said. We do nothing. We don't run. We don't hide. We don't send apologies. We wait. Wait. The left minister squeaked. Wait for them to send a buster call and wipe us off the map. They won't, Naruto said with certainty. A buster call is loud. It's messy. It admits they lost control. People like that, the ones who play games from the shadows, they hate messes. They'll send someone quiet, someone precise. They'll come here expecting to find a scared little kingdom ready to be surgically removed from the board. Instead, he paused, a slow, confident smile spreading across his face. They're going to find me. As if on cue, a guard burst into the throne room, his face pale with alarm. Your Majesty, a ship has breached our waters. It's a world government vessel, but it flies no marine colors. It's pure black. They have requested entry, demanding an audience. The ministers looked as though they were about to faint. The princes drew their weapons. King Neptune gripped his trident. The storm had arrived. Naruto just nodded. Let them in. The black ship was a predator carved from obsidian and steel. It glided through the waters of Fishman Island with a silent, chilling grace. When its ramp lowered, 2 figures emerged. Commander Serafina, her porcelain mask an unnerving blank slate in the island's soft light, and Juggernaut, a mountain of muscle and menace at her side. The air around them was cold, devoid of life. The royal guards who escorted them kept their distance, their instincts screaming at them that they were in the presence of apex predators. Ey were led to the throne room and did not so much as glance at the opulent coral architecture or the terrified fishmen they passed. Their focus was absolute. When they entered the throne room, the tension was a physical force. Serafina's icy blue eye swept the scene. She saw the king on his throne, the princes at his side. She saw the giant mermaid princess, the living weapon Poseidon, floating. Not behind the throne in a place of protection, but beside the target, a clear statement of allegiance. And she saw him, Naruto Uzumaki. He was not in a deferential position. He was standing casually, his hands in his pockets, leaning against a pillar as if this were just another boring Tuesday. His presence, the one she had sensed the echo of in the East Blue, was a calm, warm ocean of power in the room. Utterly unperturbed by her arrival, she stopped in the center of the room, Juggernaut a monolithic statue behind her. She did not bow. She did not offer greetings. By order of the 5 elders, the supreme authority of the world government, she began, her voice a melodic, chilling monotone that filled the vast chamber. I am here to address the presence of the unregistered special class individual, Naruto Uzumaki. Her gaze settled on Naruto. Your existence and unsanctioned abilities have been deemed a critical threat to the established global balance. You are hereby ordered to, sir, render yourself to the immediate custody of Cipher Pol Igus 0 for transport to a secure facility for assessment and permanent containment. She then turned her head slightly, her masked face addressing King Neptune. Compliance will be noted. Failure to comply will result in Ryugu Kingdom being reclassified as a rogue state, an enemy of world peace, and subject to proportional rectification. The threat was delivered with the cold, passionless finality of a death sentence. The ministers began to tremble visibly. Naruto pushed himself off the pillar and walked forward, stopping a few feet in front of Serafina. He looked at her, at the impassive mask, the deadness in her eye, and the immense, disciplined killing power she held coiled within her. Then he looked past her, at the system she represented. A system that would orchestrate a civil war for political gain, that would cage a child for her power, that would extinguish any light it couldn't control. He met her cold gaze. No, he said. The word was not shouted. It was not defiant. It was a simple, calm, and absolute statement of fact. As immovable as a mountain. As certain as the sunrise. He then glanced at Shirahoshi, who watched him with nervous but unwavering trust. Your balance is a carefully constructed lie, he continued, his voice still quiet, yet every person in the room felt its weight. It's the peace of the prison yard. You don't protect the world. You chain it, and I'm not in the mood to be chained. Neither, he gestured with his thumb towards the princess, is she. Serafina's mask, of course, showed nothing. But for a single, infinitesimal moment, the air around her grew so cold it could have frozen the sea. Naruto felt the spike in her intent, a needle of pure, focused malice in the ocean of her disciplined calm. The diplomatic phase was over. She gave a slow, deliberate turn, her white coat flaring. The variable resists calibration, she said, her voice devoid of any inflection. The assessment is complete. She and Juggernaut began to walk out of the throne room, their footsteps echoing in the crushing silence. At the doorway, she paused without turning around. A formal response from the world government has been logged, she stated. Expect it to be delivered, promptly. The doors closed behind them, leaving a silence in their wake that was heavier and more terrifying than the battle with Hodi's army had ever been. The ministers collapsed to the floor in despair. Naruto simply turned to the royal family, a wry, untroubled look on his face. Well, he said, breaking the tension. That was a short vacation. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Sun's Shadow, the Sea's Voice. The departure of Cipher Pol Igus 0 left a vacuum in the throne room, a chilling silence that was somehow louder than the ministers' earlier panic. They lay on the floor in a state of near catatonia, muttering about Buster Calls and the end of their kingdom. King Neptune, however, remained on his feet. His grip on his trident so tight his knuckles were white. The defiance he had shown was real, but the reality of the threat was a cold weight in his gut. They will be back, Fukabashi said, stating the obvious. And they will not be coming to talk. Naruto, who had been watching the doorway with a thoughtful expression, finally turned back to them. They're not gone, he said simply. The statum and sent a fresh wave of terror through the room. What do you mean? Ryuboshi asked, his hand flying to the hilt of his sword. They didn't leave, Naruto elaborated, tapping his temple. Their ship is still out there. Just beyond the island's bubble, sitting in the dark. They're preparing. An opponent like that, the cold, quiet one, she doesn't make threats she can't back up immediately. She didn't leave to get an army. She is the army. She was just delivering the paperwork. This assessment, so calm and logical, was more terrifying than any panicked speculation. They were under siege by an unseen enemy who was already at their gates. What do we do? Manbashi asked, his usual cheerful demeanor completely gone. We can't fight the entire world government. We aren't fighting the world government, Naruto corrected him. We're fighting two people, a very strong, very fast hammer, and a very sharp, very precise scalpel. We just need to be ready for them. His gaze shifted to Shirahoshi. Princess, I'm going to need your help. Shirahoshi, who had been floating silently, her mind still reeling from the confrontation, straightened up. A flicker of her old fear was in her eyes, but she was overshadowed by the trust she had in him. Anything, Naruto-sama, that song of yours, he began, walking towards her. The one I heard from my world. It's a part of you, a part of your power. It's a call. I need you to do it again. Not a song of sadness this time. I need you to reach out, to feel the ocean around us. I need you to be our eyes and ears. I don't know how, she stammered. It just happens. When I am sad, or afraid, then don't be afraid, he said softly, stopping before her. He reached up and placed a hand on her cheek, his touch a small point of warmth against her colossal form. Be angry. Be protective. Think of your people. Think of your mother's dream. Let that be the feeling that fuels your voice. Reach out with your heart and ask the sea to show you what's coming. He guided her, his own sage energy a gentle, supporting current that helped her focus. She closed her eyes, her breathing evening out. She pushed past the fear, the instinct to retreat into her shell. She thought of Hodi's hatred, of Serafina's cold, dead eyes, of the threat hanging over the home she was only just beginning to truly know. A new feeling rose within her, a fierce, protective instinct. A queen's resolve. A low, resonant hum began to emanate from her, a single, pure note that vibrated through the water of the throne room. It wasn't a cry of sorrow, it was a call to attention. A summons. Outside the island, in the dark abyss, the Sea Kings stirred. Their ancient eyes opened. They were no longer just watching, they were listening. Shirahoshi's consciousness expanded. For the first time, she was not just a beacon, but a receiver. Through the senses of the Sea Kings arrayed around the island, she saw the black, predatory ship, hovering in the darkness like a void kraken. She saw movement on its deck, the deployment of a strange, complex piece of machinery. And she felt two life forces, 2 points of cold, sharp intent, detach from the vessel. They were coming. Her eyes snapped open. They're on their way, she said, her voice clear and steady. 2 of them. They've split up. One is heading for the palace, moving with incredible speed. The other other is deploying something from the ship. A device. It feels cold, like the sea with all its life taken away. At that exact moment, the Veritas agent, the same captain of the guard, burst into the room, his face grim. He bowed quickly to Fukabashi. Your Highness, an urgent message from our source. Cypher Pol Igus Zero is deploying a prototype weapon. It's called a null field projector. It's based on Seastone technology but amplified. It doesn't just weaken Devil Fruit users, it's designed to actively suppress and disrupt all forms of ambient life energy in a wide area. Haki, electro, anything like what Sir Uzumaki uses. It creates a dead zone. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. A 2-pronged attack, Juggernaut, the hammer, would create a high-profile diversion at the palace, drawing all their attention. Meanwhile, Serafina, the scalpel, would operate within the field of the null projector, a field that would theoretically render Naruto powerless, allowing to eliminate him with surgical precision. It was a brilliant, ruthless, and perfectly coordinated strategy. Naruto's smile didn't falter. It widened. A dead zone, huh? Clever. He turned to King Neptune. Your Majesty, you and the princes need to intercept the hammer. Don't try to beat him, just hold him. He's the distraction. Keep him busy and away from the citizens. Neptune nodded, his expression grimly determined. And you, Sir Uzumaki, I'm going to have a chat with the scalpel, Naruto said. She and I have a disagreement about the definition of balance. He looked at Shirahoshi, his expression serious but reassuring. Princess, that device on the ship is the real threat. While we're keeping them busy, I need you to do something only you can do. Tell your friends out there, he gestured to the ocean beyond, to take out the trash. It was a command, a delegation of authority. He wasn't just protecting her, he was making her a part of the battle plan. A critical part. A surge of purpose, fierce and bright, flooded through her. I will, she said, her voice ringing with a conviction that surprised even herself. Good. Naruto turned towards the main entrance of the palace. Now, let's go give our guests the welcome they deserve. Juggernaut moved through the water with the force and trajectory of a torpedo. His powerful legs propelled him at impossible speeds, the water parting before him. His target was Ryugu Palace, his mission simple: cause as much chaos and destruction as possible. Draw their fire. Break their morale. He burst through the outer wall of the palace not with subtlety, but with sheer, overwhelming force, shattering a 30-foot thick coral wall into a cloud of pink dust. He landed in one of the main courtyards, a hulking figure of menace in his snarling Oni mask. He found the royal family waiting for him. King Neptune stood at the center, his trident held in a two-handed grip, radiating an aura of pure, regal fury. Fukabashi, Ryuboshi, and Manbashi fanned out at his sides, their own weapons gleaming. That's far enough, beast of the world government. Neptune boomed, his voice shaking the very foundations of his home. Juggernaut simply cracked his knuckles, the sound like boulders grinding together. The king, he rumbled, his voice a deep, gravelly bass that seemed to come from the center of the earth. My orders are to neutrally Z the political structure of this island. Your throne will make a fine pile of rubble. He charged. For a being of his size, his speed was astonishing. He crossed the 100-yard courtyard in the blink of an eye, his massive fist, hardened with armament hockey to the color of black steel, cocked back for a single, devastating blow aimed at the king's head. Neptune didn't flinch. He met the charge head-on, his own trident glowing with the pressure and power of the deep sea. The clash was apocalyptic. Juggernaut's fist met the broad side of the trident, and the resulting shockwave was a physical thing. A dome of force that blew out every window in the courtyard and sent guards flying. The very water in the air seemed to boil. Juggernaut was thrown back several feet, his arm trembling from the impact. He stared at the king, a flicker of surprise in his posture. He had expected a soft, pampered monarch. He had not expected a warrior who could meet his full force blow and not yield an inch. This kingdom is not as weak as your masters believe, Neptune growled, his arms straining, the muscles in his massive tail coiling like steel cables. For the sin of threatening my home, you will face the wrath of the sea. Fukabashi and the others surged forward, and the battle for Ryugu Palace began, a brutal, earth-shaking confrontation of hammer against trident, a king's love against a government's will. Meanwhile, on the other side of the island, a coldness was spreading. From the black ship, a low hum emanated as the null field projector activated. It was an invisible wave of energy, an anti-life frequency that washed over Fish-Man Island. The vibrant, glowing corals seemed to dim slightly. The smaller fish swam erratically, their senses confused. Naruto felt it like a physical blow. He was standing in a secluded coral forest, waiting, when the field hit him. One moment, he was a part of the world, feeling the gentle hum of every life force, the flow of water, the ancient energy of the earth beneath the sea. The next, silence. His sage mode, his perfect connection to the natural world, was severed. It was as if 1,000 threads connecting him to the universe had been snipped at once. The world, which had been a symphony of life to his senses, was suddenly muted, gray, flat. He could still feel his own chakra, but it felt isolated, a flickering candle in a vast, empty room. He was cut off. Impressive technology, he said to the empty forest. A voice, melodic and cold, answered from the shadows behind him. It was designed for anomalies like you. Beings who draw air strength from sources beyond the self. In this field, you are reduced. You are merely a man. And I am the pinnacle of what a man can be trained to become. Serafina stepped out from behind a massive stalk of sea kelp. She moved with a liquid grace, her white uniform a stark contrast to the dimming light of the forest. She held a single, slender blade, its steel a cold, unforgiving gray. Your will is strong, Naruto Uzumaki. She stated, her masked face tilting slightly. I can still feel its echo. But a will cannot stop a blade. Your story ends here. She attacked. It was not a charge, it was a disappearance. She was there one moment, and the next she was behind him, her blade already tracing a silver arc towards his neck. It was the Rokushiki art of Soru, perfected to a degree that defied physics. Naruto moved, his body reacting on pure instinct honed by 1,000 battles. He couldn't sense her with his sage's perception, but he could still see, still hear, still feel the displacement of water. He ducked under the slash, the wind from her blade cold against his skin, and spun, aiming a low kick at her legs. She was no longer there. She had used Geppo, kicking off the water itself to launch herself into a new position. She flowed from one Rokushiki technique to the next with a seamless, deadly grace, her movements a blur of white. Shigen, a finger pistol strike, jabbed at his eyes. Rankyaku, a tempest kick, sent a blade of compressed water slicing towards his chest. Naruto was on the defensive, a position he hadn't been in for a very, very long time. Without his sage mode, his precognitive senses were gone. He was reacting, not anticipating. His movements were fluid, graceful, the pinnacle of shinobi taijutsu, but he was fighting an opponent whose speed was a match for his own base form. "You are skilled," Serafina's voice stated, coming from all directions at once as she flickered around him. "Your reflexes are superhuman, but you are predictable. You follow the patterns of a fighter. I follow the patterns of a killer." Her blade finally found its mark, a shallow cut across his arm. It was nothing, a scratch, but it was a point for her. A proof of concept. The anomaly could be bled. Naruto skidded to a halt, his blue eyes sharp and focused. The casual ease was gone, replaced by the deadly seriousness of a veteran warrior. He looked at the cut on his arm, then back at her. "You're right," he said, a small, dangerous smile touching his lips. "I was fighting like a man." He fell into a low, ready stance. Time to fight like a ninja. Shirahoshi Fei. LT The Null Field's activation is a wave of nausea and fear. She felt Naruto's vibrant, warm life force, which had been a sun in her senses, suddenly dim, becoming a distant, flickering star. She knew he was in trouble. Her father and brothers were locked in a desperate battle. Naruto was facing an enemy designed to kill him. The fate of the battle, the fate of her entire kingdom, rested on her. On the crybaby princess. She closed her eyes, fear and determination warring in her heart. "Tell your friends to take out the trash." Naruto's words echoed in her mind. He trusted her. He believed in her. She would not fail him. She focused, her consciousness soaring out of the palace, out of the island's bubble, into the cold, black abyss where her silent, colossal friends were waiting. She did not send a feeling of sadness or fear. She sent an image, a command. She showed them the black ship. She showed them the cold, life-stealing device on its deck. And for the first time in her life, she gave a direct, unambiguous order. Not with a song, but with a silent scream of her will that echoed through the deepest trenches of the sea. "Destroy it." In the crushing darkness, a dozen ancient eyes, each burning with a cold, primordial light, turned as one towards the black ship. The sea began to move, not with the chaos of a storm, but with the coordinated, unstoppable force of a rising tide. Gods of the deep had received their queen's command, and they were rising to answer. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Unraveling Thread. The coral forest had become a cage of flashing blades and flickering shadows. Serafina was a ghost, a phantom of pure, disciplined lethality. Every movement was an attack, every step a repositioning for a new angle of assault. She was a master of the Rokushiki, She used the techniques not as individual moves, but as a seamless, flowing language of death. The air itself was her weapon, the water her stepping stone. Naruto, stripped of his sage mode's precognition, was forced to rely on the bedrock of his training, years of instinct, countless life and death battles, and a raw physical prowess that still surpassed any normal human. He was a blur of black and gold, his movements economical, precise, a stark contrast to Serafina's fluid grace. Their battle was a silent, high-speed chess match where every piece was a killing blow. He deflected a shiga, and aimed at his throat with the back of his hand, the force of the blow still sending a jarring shock up his arm. He twisted away from a rankyaku that sliced a massive coral tree in half, the clean, RFECT cut a testament to the power behind the attack. He was holding his own, but it was a reactive battle. He was defending, not attacking. He needed to change the rhythm of the fight. "You cannot win," Serafina's voice stated, coming from his left as she launched off the water's surface. Her slender blade was coated in a faint, dark sheen of armament hockey, turning the simple steel into something that could cut through mountains. "Your energy is finite. My technique is perfect. The outcome is a matter of mathematics. Fighting's not math, Naruto grunted, weaving under the strike and slamming his palm against the ground. The earth shuddered, a localized shockwave that threw up a cloud of sand and debris, momentarily obscuring the battlefield. It was a classic shinobi tactic: control the environment. He used the split second of distraction to create two shadow clones. It was a risk. In this muted field, every ounce of his chakra felt precious, isolated. But he needed to break her perfect, single-minded focus. The clones shot out in opposite directions, one charging Serafina with a Rasengan, flickering and unstable without his usual level of control, while the other threw a volley of kunai. Serafina's response was brutally efficient. She sidestepped the Rasengan, her body moving with an unnatural fluidity, and used Tekai, her body hardening to the consistency of iron. The kunai bounced harmlessly off her uniform. With a single, contemptuous backhand, she shattered the first clone, and with a swift kick that was faster than the eye could follow, she dispersed the second. Clones. Her voice was laced with something that might have been disdain. A child's trick. An attempt to overwhelm a singular focus. But my focus is not singular. It is absolute. She was right. But the clones hadn't been an attempt to win. They had been a diagnostic tool. In the instant she had struck them, Naruto had felt the feedback, the precise amount of force she used, the way her haki flared, the minute shift in her breathing. He had gained a crucial piece of data. She was perfect, yes. But perfection has a pattern. He shot forward, no longer just reacting, but initiating. He didn't use a grand technique. He engaged her in pure taijutsu, a close-quarters storm of fists and feet. It was what she wanted, what she excelled at. But now, he wasn't just defending. He was testing, pushing. He allowed her blade to graze his cloak, feeling the exact trajectory of the cut. He let his block of her Shigen land slightly off-center, gauging the torque of her wrist. He was learning her rhythm, her perfect, mathematical rhythm. And he was beginning to find its flaws. The null field projector on the deck of the black ship hummed with a malevolent, low-frequency energy. The few Cypher Pol A. Gents left on board monitored its output, their faces impassive, confident in the technological superiority of the world government. Their confidence was their last mistake. The first sign of trouble was not a sound or a sight, but a feeling, a sudden, inexplicable pressure that seemed to squeeze the ship from all sides. The steel hull groaned, the sound of stressed metal echoing through the vessel. Then, the sea went black. Not the black of the abyss, but the black of something solid, something immense, blocking out all ambient light. One of the agents looked at the forward view screen and his professional calm finally shattered. An eye, larger than the ship itself, was staring back at him. It was an ancient, intelligent, and deeply cold eye, belonging to a sea king of a size that had only ever been recorded in legends. Before he could even scream a warning, the attack came. It was not a single, chaotic assault. It was a coordinated, tactical strike. From below, a monolithic, whale-like sea king rose, its broad back lifting the entire ship out of the water as if it were a child's toy. The null field projector sputtered as its power conduits were wrenched from the sea. From the port side, the eel-like sea king, the one from Gyeongcord Plaza, opened its colossal maw and bit down. It didn't just bite the ship, it bit through it. Its teeth, each one a razor-sharp spear of calcified bone, sheared through the reinforced hull, the engine room, and the command deck in a single, catastrophic crunch of metal and wiring. From the starboard side, a dozen smaller, faster sea kings, shaped like giant, armored squids, wrapped their tentacles around the fractured vessel, their combined strength pulling the two halves of the ship apart like a rotten fruit. Shirahoshi, her consciousness linked to her subjects, felt the cold metal of the ship, the sputtering death of the projector, the panicked, fleeting thoughts of the men on board. She felt no triumph, no pleasure in their demise. There was only a cold, hard resolve. She had given the order. She had protected her home. She had protected Naruto. It was the first act of her queenship, and it was an act of war. As the last pieces of the ship and the null field projector sank into the crushing blackness of the abyss, the oppressive, life-dampening field that covered Fish Man Island vanished. In the coral forest, the effect was instantaneous. One moment, Naruto was fighting in a muted, gray world, his senses blunted, his connection to the world severed. The next, the symphony returned. The vibrant life energy of the island, the gentle hum of the water, the ancient, powerful thrum of the earth beneath his feet, it all came flooding back into his senses in a glorious, overwhelming wave. Sage mode activated not as a choice, but as an instinct. The orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes, his pupils shifting into the cross slits of a toad sage. The world snapped into a new dimension of clarity. He no longer saw Serafina as a blur of white. He saw her every muscle twitch, felt the flow of her blood, sensed the spike of her intent an entire half-second before she even began to move. Her perfect technique was now a slow, predictable dance. Serafina felt the change immediately. The air, which had been dead and sterile, was suddenly alive, humming with an energy that seemed to bend to the will of the man in front of her. His presence, which had been a flickering candle, had just erupted into a full-blown star. He felt bigger, like he was a part of the forest itself, a part of the sea, a part of the world. She paused in her attack, her analytical mind struggling to process the new data. The null field, she whispered, the first hint of genuine surprise in her voice. I think my ride home just arrived, Naruto said, his voice different now. It was layered, resonant, carrying the echo of the natural world. He moved. It was not the desperate, reactive speed of before. He simply vanished. There was no flicker, no blur. He was one place, and then he was another. He appeared directly in front of her, his hand open, not in a strike, but in a gesture. Rasengan, a perfect sphere of pure, swirling chakra, stable and immense, roared into existence in his palm. It wasn't the unstable version from before. This one was a miniature, controlled hurricane, its sound a high-pitched scream that tore at the silence. It was radiating so much life energy that the nearby coral began to glow brighter, the small fish in the vicinity scattering in a panic. Serafina's training took over. She brought her blade up, coated in the thickest layer of armament haki she could muster, and crossed it with her free hand, also hardened with tekai and haki, in a desperate, last-ditch defensive posture. The impact was not an explosion. It was an overwhelming, grinding vortex of force. The Rasengan met her defense, and for a moment, she held. She was the immovable object of the world government's will. But Naruto was the irresistible force of life itself. Her blade shattered, the pieces vaporized by the sheer rotational energy. Her haki-infused gauntlet cracked, then disintegrated. The spiraling chakra tore through her tekai as if it were wet paper. It slammed into her chest, not with a piercing impact, but with 1,000 simultaneous strikes from every conceivable angle. She was launched backwards, a white comet shooting through the coral forest. She crashed through a dozen ancient coral trees, each one exploding into dust on impact, before finally slamming into the rock wall that formed the outer boundary of the island's bubble, cracking it. She slid to the ground, a crumpled heap of white. Her porcelain mask was cracked, a fine spiderweb of lines radiating from the center. A single trickle of blood ran from beneath it. Her body was broken, her ribs shattered, her disciplined energy pathways in chaos. But she was alive. Naruto had held back, turning a lethal blow into a merely devastating one. He walked slowly towards her, the Rasengan in his hand dissipating into harmless motes of light. He stood over her, his shadow falling on her broken form. He reached down, not to strike, but and gently removed the cracked mask. The face beneath was young, far younger than her voice and presence suggested. She was beautiful, in a severe, sculpted way, with sharp cheekbones and alabaster skin. But her eyes, her icy blue eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a profound, system-shattering confusion. She was looking at him, but she was seeing a world of data that did not compute. She had been taught that order was strength, that emotion was weakness, that perfection was the ultimate weapon. This man was the antithesis of all of that. He was chaotic, emotional, and utterly, impossibly powerful. Her entire worldview, the foundation of her existence, had just been shattered along with her ribs. Why? She whispered, the voice no longer a melodic monotone, but the hoarse, pained voice of a young woman. Why am I still alive? Naruto looked down at her, his sage's eyes holding no malice, only a deep, weary sadness. Because killing you doesn't fix anything, he said. It just makes another ghost. You're not my real enemy. You're just a tool, One that's been sharpened so much you've forgotten you were ever anything else. He turned and began to walk away, back towards the palace. Go back to your masters, he said over his shoulder. Tell them their math is wrong. Tell them the world isn't an equation to be solved. And tell them to leave Fish-Man Island alone. Back at the palace, the battle had reached a stalemate. Juggernaut was a monster of seemingly endless stamina and brute force, but he could not break the line of the royal family. King Neptune, fighting with the fury of a father defending his home, had proven to be his equal in raw power. Just as Juggernaut was preparing for another devastating charge, he froze. He felt it, even from a distance. Serafina's life force, which had been a cold, sharp point of light, had flickered violently and then dimmed to a bare ember. She had been defeated. The mission was a failure. His professional discipline overrode his battle rage. He disengaged, leaping backwards, putting 100 yards between himself and the Neptune family. The operational parameters have changed, he rumbled, his voice flat. This engagement is concluded. Without another word, he turned and shot away, a blur of motion leaving the palace behind, heading for the surface to rendezvous with his defeated partner. The royal family stood panting, battered and bruised but victorious. They had held the line. As the silence descended on the courtyard, Naruto walked in, looking completely unharmed. Did you? Fukabashi began, his voice filled with awe. She'll live, Naruto said simply, but I don't think she'll be back anytime soon. He looked around the damaged courtyard, at the relieved faces of the royal family, and then his gaze went to the ceiling. As if looking up through the 10,000 meters of water to the sky above. But this is just the beginning. We just picked a fight with the biggest bullies in the schoolyard. They're going to come back. And they're going to bring their friends. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The first ripple of the dawn. The quiet that followed the battle was heavier than the sea itself. It was a quiet filled with unspoken questions. With the dawning realization that their victory was not an ending, but a declaration. They had swatted the hand of the world government. Now, they had to contend with the arm, the body. And the iron will that moved it. Naruto found Shirahoshi in the sea forest once more. She was not crying by her mother's grave. She was floating silently before it, her expression calm and contemplative. The Sea Kings, their duty done, had retreated to the deep, but a palpable connection remained. It was a low hum in Naruto's sage-enhanced senses, a constant, silent conversation. Between the princess and the ancient beings who served her. She was no longer just a beacon of sorrow, she was a nexus of power. They're gone, Naruto said, his voice gentle as he came to a stop beside her. Yes, she replied, her voice steady. The woman, Serafina, her life force is weak, but it is moving away, towards the surface. They have retreated. She turned to him, her eyes, which had for so long been pools of fear, now held a deep, clear gravity. This is my fault. I have brought this trouble to our home. By existing. By being with you. Don't, Naruto said, his voice firm but not unkind. This isn't your fault. It's theirs. You don't blame the sun for the shadows it casts. Hody Jones, the world government, they're the ones who choose to live in the dark, to twist things for their own power. All you did, all we did, was choose not to let them. But what happens now? She asked, the question that hung over the entire island. We cannot hide from the world. Good, Naruto said with a smile. I'm sick of hiding. He looked at the grave of Queen Otahime. Your mother's dream wasn't to keep your people safe by locking them at the bottom of the ocean. It was to see them live in the sun, alongside humans. That kind of dream, you can't achieve it by waiting for the world to become a better place. You have to go out and make it a better place. You have to show them they have nothing to fear. His words resonated with a truth she was just beginning to grasp. Her mother's dream had always seemed like a beautiful, impossible fairy tale. With Naruto standing here, it felt achievable. It felt like a promise waiting to be kept. I think I understand, she said softly. Their conversation was cut short by the urgent approach of Fukabashi. His expression was a thundercloud of anxiety. Naruto Dono. Father requires your presence. The world has already begun to react. The throne room was no longer a scene of panic, but one of grim strategy. King Neptune held a copy of the World Economic Journal, delivered just moments before by a news coup. The massive headline, printed in bold, accusatory letters, was a masterstroke of political warfare. Royal family of fish man I. Sland conspires with notorious terrorist. Ancient weapon Poseidon unleashed in violent rebellion against world government peacekeepers. The article beneath was a work of pure fiction. It painted Naruto as a known subversive with ties to the Revolutionary Army. It described the peacekeeping mission of Cypher Polygus Zero as an attempt to de-escalate a violent coup led by Naruto himself, who brainwashed the unstable mermaid princess into turning her power against the forces of justice. It was a declaration of war, fought not with cannons, but with ink and lies. They have branded as criminals to the entire world. King Neptune rumbled, his voice a low growl of fury. He crumpled the newspaper in his colossal fist. They seek to isolate us, to turn every human kingdom against us, to justify any action they take next as a necessary pacification. They're building a cage around the island, Naruto observed, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the article. Not with ships, but with fear. They want to make sure that if we cry for help, no one will listen. It was at this moment that the weight of their decision, of their defiance, truly settled upon the royal family. They had chosen to stand. But they now stood alone against a global superpower that controlled the narrative of reality itself. King Neptune looked from the crushed newspaper to his daughter, and then to Naruto. A deep, ancient resolve settled in his eyes. He had been a king of fear for too long. It was time to be a king of faith. There is a prophecy, he said, his voice filling the silent throne room. An old story, passed down through the royal line, connected to the promise made by the first Joy Boy, 800 years ago. He spoke of a divided world, of a promise made to the mermaid princess of that era. A promise that one day, a man would appear who would inherit Joy Boy's will. This man would guide the princess, and together, they would use the power of the Sea Kings, the Ark, Noah, to fulfill the promise and bring the fish men to a new home in the sun. This man, the prophecy said, would be the sun that rises to meet the heart of the sea. He looked directly at Naruto. You are that man, I am certain of it. You carry his will, his laughter, his impossible strength. You are the second coming of Joy Boy. He then turned his gaze to Shirahoshi, his expression a mixture of fatherly love and kingly duty. And you, my daughter, are the heart of the sea, the current incarnation of Poseidon. Your meeting was not chance. It was destiny, centuries in the making. He took a deep breath, the next words carrying the weight of his entire kingdom's future. Naruto Uzumaki, the king declared, his voice booming with royal authority. In the name of fulfilling the ancient promise, for the sake of my people's dream and the destiny of this world, I ask you to take my daughter, Shirahoshi's, hand in marriage. The proposal hung in the air, a shocking, monumental thing. The princes stared, their minds reeling. Shirahoshi gasped, her face flushing a deep, beautiful pink, her eyes wide with 1,000 conflicting emotions. This was the solution, the political and mystical answer to their plight. A union, the fusion of the sun and the sea. It was a move that would solidify their alliance, a statement to the world that their fates were now one. But Naruto didn't look triumphant. He looked uncomfortable. He met the king's earnest gaze, then looked at Shirahoshi's shocked, vulnerable face. No, Naruto said, his voice quiet but absolute. The refusal was a thunderclap in the silent room. King Neptune stared, utterly baffled. But the prophecy, the promise, it is your destiny. I don't care about destiny, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on Shirahoshi. I've had a destiny thrown at me before. A prophecy that said I'd save the world. It's a heavy burden to place on someone's shoulders. And I won't do that to her. He floated up slightly, meeting Shirahoshi at eye level. Her heart was pounding. He had refused. He had rejected her. The old, familiar sting of fear and inadequacy pricked at her. Shirahoshi, he said, his voice soft, for her alone. A promise isn't something you're forced into by an old story. A marriage isn't a political tool to save a kingdom. They're choices. Choices you make with your own heart, with your own will. I made you a promise that I would protect you, that I would help you see the sun. I'm not going to break that promise by trapping you in another one. He saw the tears welling in her eyes and sighed. That's not what I meant. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. His small hand a point of impossible gentleness. Listen to me. What your father is offering is a cage, just a prettier one than the tower. He's asking us to follow a script written by someone else. But your mother's dream, your dream, it's about freedom. And freedom is about choice. Suddenly, Shirahoshi understood. He wasn't rejecting her. He was rejecting the cage of destiny itself. He was protecting her freedom, the very gift he had just given her. In that moment, her admiration for him, the deep well of gratitude and trust, blossomed into something more. Something warm and fierce and entirely her own. She turned to her father, and for the first time in her life, she addressed him not as a frightened child, but as a queen. "Father," she said, her voice clear and ringing with a newfound authority that stunned the court. "I am grateful for your concern. And I believe in the prophecy. But Naruto-sama is right. The promise will not be fulfilled by a political union. It will be fulfilled by a bond of trust." She turned back to Naruto, a shy but determined smile on her face. I would be honored to be your bride, Naruto-sama," she said, her words causing her brother's jaws to drop. "But I will not be a princess given as part of a treaty. I will be a partner, who chooses to stand by your side. If you will have me." It was her choice, her declaration. She had taken the destiny they had tried to place upon her and had reforged it with her own will. Naruto looked at her, at the strength shining in her eyes, and his own smile returned, genuine and bright. "I'd like that," he said softly, "when the time is right. When you've seen the world, and you still feel the same way." It's a promise. It was an acceptance, and a deferral. A commitment made not to a king or a prophecy, but to each other. It was a new kind of promise, one forged in the here and now. Their moment was interrupted by the Veritas captain, who rushed in, his face pale with urgency. "Your Majesty, Naruto Dono, a new report. The world government isn't just using propaganda. They've dispatched Admiral Kizaru and his fleet. They're not heading here directly. They're establishing a total blockade around the Sabayati archipelago. Nothing gets to the New World, and nothing gets to Fishman Island, without passing through the justice of a Marine Admiral." The cage was no longer just made of words. It was now being forged in steel. They were trapped. Naruto's expression hardened. Kizaru. He'd read the reports. A man who could become light itself. A dangerous, unpredictable power. "They're trying to choke us out," Fukabashi said grimly. "To cut us off from the world and deal with us at their leisure. Then we won't wait for them to come to us," Naruto said, his decision instantaneous. He looked at the royal family, at Shirahoshi, a plan already forming in his mind, a bold, impossible, and utterly Naruto-like plan. "We're leaving," he declared. "All of us. We're going to take the Ark, Noah. We're going to the surface. And we're going to take a little trip. Your mother's dream was to get a signature from the world nobles, to prove humans and fishmen could coexist. That's a good first step." A dangerous, almost feral grin spread across his face. "So let's go get one. We're going to marry Geoise." The statement was so audacious, so suicidal, that for a moment, the entire throne room was plunged into a silence more profound than any that had come before. To go to the holy land of the celestial dragons, the very heart of their enemy's power, was not just a declaration of war. It was a declaration of insanity. But looking at the confident, sun-bright smile on Naruto's face, and at the giant, beautiful princess floating beside him, now radiating a quiet strength of her own, it also felt somehow like the only path forward. The dawn was coming, and they were no longer going to wait for it. They were going to rise to meet it. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Ark of Dawn. The silence in the throne room was so absolute it was a physical presence, a crushing weight of pure, undiluted shock. The ministers looked as though their souls had fled their bodies. The princes stared at Naruto. Their expressions a perfect portrait of disbelief. To sail to marry Geoise, the holy sanctuary of the celestial dragons, was not a plan. It was a death wish, elegantly gift-wrapped. The silence was shattered by a sound no one expected. Laughter. It was not a small chuckle, but a deep, booming, soul-shaking laugh that echoed from the very depths of King Neptune's being. It was the laugh of a man who had stared into the abyss of despair for a decade and had just been told the most gloriously, beautifully insane joke in the history of the world. He threw his head back, his massive body shaking. Tears of mirth and relief streaming down his face. To marry Geoise, he roared, slamming the butt of his trident on the floor with a joyous boom. To the heart of the beast. Ha 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 ha. Of course, it is the only way. His sudden, utter acceptance of the suicidal plan was more shocking than the plan itself. He turned his beaming, tear-streaked face to Naruto. For years, we have debated. We have pleaded, we have crawled for scraps of acceptance from the surface. We have tried to play their game by their rules. And you, in a single day, have shown us the folly of that path. The only way to change the game is to flip the entire board. The king's infectious, liberated joy was a spark in the tense room. Fukabashi looked at his father, then at Naruto's unshakable confidence, and finally at his sister, who was watching Naruto with an expression of absolute faith. The fear in the prince's heart was still there, but something else was rising to meet it, a wild, exhilarating hope. It is madness, Fukabashi said, a slow smile spreading across his own face. But our current path leads only to subjugation or annihilation. If we are to fall, let us fall while charging the gates of heaven itself. Quote, I've always wanted to see the Holy Land. Manbashi chimed in, his natural optimism reignited. I hear the gift shops are terrible. Naruto grinned. The royal family of Fish Man Island, he decided, was much stronger than they knew. Then it's settled, Naruto said. But we do this on our terms. This isn't an invasion. It's a diplomatic mission. A very, very aggressive diplomatic mission. We are going there to deliver a message, not to start a war. A message delivered on an island-sized ship, escorted by sea kings, King Neptune chuckled. Subtlety has never been our strong suit. He turned to his ministers, who were slowly regaining consciousness. Gentlemen, stop trembling and make yourselves useful. Prepare the Ark Noah for departure. And summon the citizens to Gyeongcord Plaza. Their king has an announcement to make. Gyeongcord Plaza was filled to capacity. The people of Fish Man Island gathered, their faces a mixture of confusion and anxiety. The rumors had spread like wildfire. The princess had returned, a human had saved them, and the world government had declared them enemies. They stood in a nervous silence, waiting for the truth. King Neptune stood on the central platform, not on a throne, but on his own 2 feet, his family and Naruto at his side. He looked out at the faces of his people, and he did not see subjects. He saw a family that he had nearly failed. People of Ryugu Kingdom. His voice boomed, magically amplified to carry across the entire plaza. For 10 years, I have ruled you as a king of fear. I allowed the pain of our past to build a cage around our future. I asked you to live in the shadows, to hope for a dawn that I myself did not believe would ever come. Today, I apologize for my weakness. Today, that reign of fear is over. A murmur went through the crowd. The world government has branded us rebels and terrorists, Neptune continued, his voice ringing with a newfound strength. They seek to isolate us, to starve us, to punish us for daring to defend ourselves. They expect us to cower in the deep and wait for their judgment. We will not. He gestured to Naruto. The prophecy has come to pass. The one who carries the will of Joy Boy has arrived. He is not a conqueror, but a guide. A friend. He then gestured to his daughter. And our princess has found her voice. She is no longer a prisoner of her power, but its master. She is the hope of our future. Shirahoshi, standing beside Naruto, trembled, but she met the gaze of her people, and she did not look away. The time for waiting is over, Neptune declared, his voice rising to a passionate crescendo. The promise made to our ancestors will not be fulfilled by begging for acceptance. It will be fulfilled by claiming our place in the world. We are going to the surface. We are taking the great Ark Noah, and we are sailing to Mary Geoise to deliver the petition for peace that Queen Otahime gave her life for. We will look the Selles, teal dragons in the eye and show them that our will is not so easily broken. He raised his trident to the sky. This is not an order. It is an invitation. Any who wish to remain here will be protected. But for those of you who still believe in my wife's dream, for those of you who wish to see the sun not in stories, but with your own eyes, I invite you to join us. Join us on a journey to greet the dawn. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a single child's voice cried out, "Hooray for the princess!" An old fish man shouted, "For Queen Otahime!" And then the plaza erupted. It was a roar of hope. A tidal wave of emotion pent up for generations, a kingdom choosing, as one, to cast off the chains of fear and sail into the impossible. The Ark Noah was a humbling sight. It was less a ship and more a small, tethered moon. A colossal, spherical vessel of ancient wood and metal that dwarfed even Ryugu Palace. It had sat dormant for 800 years, a silent testament to a broken promise. Now, its vast decks teemed with the life and bustle of thousands of fishmen and merfolk, a nation turned into a crew, preparing for the most important voyage in their history. At the heart of the Ark, in a vast, open chamber, Naruto stood with Shirahoshi before the ship's helm, a massive, unmoving wheel that was more symbol than function. "It will not move," Fukabashi said, standing nearby. "It was built to be pulled. Only the Sea Kings, under the command of Poseidon, can move a vessel of this scale." Naruto looked at Shirahoshi. Her face was pale, the weight of this responsibility immense. "You can do this," he said, his voice a quiet anchor in her storm of doubt. "It's the same as before. Don't think of it as giving an order. Think of it as asking your friends for help. Show them where you want to go. They'll know what to do." Shirahoshi closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, reaching out with her will, with her heart. She didn't just call. She projected an image, a feeling. The Ark, her people, and a single, clear destination. The surface. It was a plea, a command, and a promise, all woven into one. Outside, in the deep ocean, the Sea Kings responded. They came in their dozens, a silent, disciplined army of leviathans. They took up positions around the Noah, their massive bodies pressing against its hull. With a great, collective groan of ancient wood and straining tethers, the Ark Noah, for the first time in 800 years, began to move. It rose from its seabed mooring, a slow, majestic, and utterly impossible ascent. The journey to the sun had begun. The ascent was a silent, beautiful pilgrimage. As the Noah rose through 10,000 meters of water, the people of Fishman Island saw their world in a way they never had before. They passed through layers of bioluminescent life, through the territories of deep-sea creatures, and ever upwards, towards the shimmering, distant ceiling of their world. The light grew from a faint hope to a brilliant, cleansing radiance. And then, with a great surge of displaced water that created a tidal wave for miles in every direction, the Ark Noah breached the surface. The collective gasp of tens of thousands of people seeing the real sun, the real sky, for the first time, was a sound of pure, unadulterated wonder. Their moment of awe was cut short by the sight before them. Sabayati Archipelago, with its iconic bubble-coated mangrove trees, was visible in the distance. Between them and it lay the blockade. A dozen marine battleships, arranged in a perfect, crescent-shaped formation, their cannons gleaming in the sun. It was an image of absolute, unyielding authority. On the deck of the central battleship, a tall, lanky figure in a pinstripe suit and a marine coat draped over his shoulders sat in a deck chair, polishing his glasses. Admiral Borsellino, better known as Kizaru, looked up at the island-sized vessel that had just appeared out of nowhere, blocking out the sun. "Ooh," he said, his voice a long, drawn-out, and utterly unconcerned drawl. "Now that is, very, very big. Troublesome." He put his glasses back on. "Looks like our little fishies didn't want to stay in their bowl." He stood up, his movements lazy, almost bored. "Well," he sighed to his subordinate, "justice must be done, I suppose. Even if it is a bit of a drag." In the next instant, he was gone. A beam of brilliant yellow light shot from the deck of his ship, crossing the miles of water in less than a second. It materialized on the prow of the Noah, reforming into the nonchalant figure of the admiral, who now stood directly before Naruto, Shirahoshi, and the royal family. The sheer speed of his arrival, the casual disregard for distance and physics, sent a chill down the spine of every fish man who witnessed it. "He there," Kizaru said, a lazy, unnerving smile on his face. "Naruto Uzumaki, I presume. And the big princess. My, the reports didn't do you justice." He looked around at the assembled fishmen on the deck. "This is an unsanctioned gathering. A very naughty violation of world government travel edicts. I'm going to have to ask you all to turn this big, round boat around and go back home. Or things could get scary." Naruto stepped forward, his expression calm, his sage mode already active, the orange pigment around his eyes a stark contrast to Kizaru's yellow suit. "We're not going back, Admiral. We have business in Mary Geoise." Quote. Kizaru's smile didn't falter. "Mary Geoise. Ooh, that's a very exclusive place. No invitations have been sent out. And you," he tilted his head, "are definitely not on the guest list. I don't know what you think you're doing, but my orders are clear. The threat you represent must be extinguished." He raised a single finger, a tiny point of light gathering at its tip. It was a casual, almost dismissive gesture, but Naruto could feel the terrifying power contained within it, a focused, compressed star of pure energy. "It's a shame," Kizaru drawled. "I hate working overtime." He fired Yasukani no Magatama, a volley of light particles, each one a deadly, explosive beam, shot from his fingertip, aimed not at Naruto, but at the crowd of fishmen behind him. It was a cruel, efficient move, designed to cause mass casualties and chaos. But the beams of light never reached their targets. Naruto moved, a golden blur of motion. He didn't try to block the volley. He appeared in front of it, his hand outstretched. A swirling sphere of black, viscous energy materialized in his palm, a miniature black hole. A truth-seeking orb. The beams of light, the very concept of energy and destruction, were not blocked or deflected. They were sucked into the orb, vanishing without a sound, without a trace, as if they had never existed. The orb then dissipated, leaving only Naruto, his hand still outstretched, standing between the Admiral and the people he had sworn to protect. A deep, profound silence fell over the deck. Kizaru's lazy smile finally, for the first time, faltered. His eyes, hidden behind his yellow glasses, widened almost imperceptibly. He had just fired a signature attack, a technique that could level a city, and this man had erased it. "My business is with the people who gave you your orders," Naruto said, his voice low and dangerous, carrying the resonant power of the world itself. "But if you insist on getting in my way..." He clenched his fist, and a new truth-seeking orb formed, this one pulsing with a golden light, a miniature, contained sun. "You'll find that I can be very, very scary too." The Admiral of the World Government stared at the man who held a sun in his hand. The immovable object had just met the unstoppable force, and for the first time in a very long time, Kizaru had no idea what was going to happen next. Chapter 10 End.